Am I in the wrong for being hurt that my boyfriend didn't invite me to his work Christmas party? I, F24, have been in a relationship with my boyfriend, M25, for over 5 years now. At the start of our relationship, we used to have frequent arguments, which was stressful and exhausting. But lately, our relationship feels more strained in a different way. We don't argue as much anymore, but when we do, it's like everything shuts down, and it makes it even harder to resolve things. Last night, I went over to his house to hang out and help him with some dishes. While we were doing that, we started talking about his work Christmas party. I casually mentioned how strange it was that partners weren't invited to work events like these. He then told me that partners are invited, but that he didn't think I would want to go. At that point, I felt a little hurt. I didn't directly say anything, but it made me feel like maybe he was embarrassed to introduce me to his coworkers. I realized it was a small comment, but it stung more than I expected. Instead of just telling him I was hurt, I decided to joke about it in a sarcastic tone, saying something like, "Can't believe you're embarrassed of me." It was playful, but I guess a little passive-aggressive, which might have been part of the problem. I thought it would just be a lighthearted moment, but he seemed to pick up on the fact that something was wrong. At this point, he sort of shut down and went to lie down on the couch. I finished cleaning up and went over to him, asking what was going on. He said he was just tired and didn't want to talk. He stayed silent for a few minutes, and I sat across from him, just trying to figure out if he was actually going to say something. I offered to sit next to him, but he said no. Then, after a few more minutes, he said, "If you want to go, you can," which just made me feel worse. I didn't want to leave, but it also didn't feel like he wanted me there. I stayed for a while longer, but eventually, he came over to the couch with me, as if nothing had happened. The whole situation felt really weird, and I was still processing everything. I tried to stay calm and told him something like, "I feel sad. Not being invited to your Christmas party hurt me, and it feels like you might be embarrassed by me." He shut down again and didn't say anything. I asked him if he was going to respond, but he just shook his head. I said something along the lines of, "It shouldn't be this hard to just say sorry, even if it was unintentional." But again, he didn't say a word. Before I left, he didn't walk me to my car, didn't say goodbye until I said it first, and didn't say, "I love you," until I said it first. It felt like he was shutting me out, and it hurt even more after everything had just happened. Today, I called him to see if he wanted to hang out or talk things through, but he was busy with something. I told him to call me back when he had time, but he never did. I ended up staying at home alone, overthinking the whole situation. Part of me wishes I would have just brushed it off and pretended everything was fine, but it's hard to ignore when it feels like a big deal to me. This isn't the first time something like this has happened. Every time we have a conflict, he seems to shut down. I know I probably should have been more direct about how I was feeling, but the way he handles these situations makes it so difficult for me to communicate openly. I don't feel like I can bring anything up without him withdrawing, and it leaves me feeling stuck. The more I think about it, the more I wonder if I overreacted. Maybe I should have just accepted that he didn't invite me and let it go. But it also feels like he's avoiding a real conversation about how I feel, and I'm unsure about whether I'm in the wrong here. I don't want to seem like I'm making a big deal out of nothing, but I also don't want to keep feeling like my emotions are being ignored. How do I address this with him without it becoming a fight? And how do I handle situations like this when he shuts down? I'm worried that I might end up apologizing for something I shouldn't, and I'm not sure how to move forward with the conversation. Update. I've been thinking a lot more about our conversation, and I'm feeling more and more unsure about how to approach this. My boyfriend's reaction to everything has been weighing on me, and I still don't know whether I handled it the right way. I feel like I've tried to be patient, but the fact that he never acknowledged how much it hurt me has left me feeling kind of abandoned. I want to believe that he didn't mean to hurt me, but at the same time, it's hard to ignore how dismissive his actions were. I can't help but wonder if he really cares about how I feel, or if he just expects me to get over things without talking them through. If this is something that happens often in our relationship, I'm starting to feel like it's not just a one-off situation. I've also noticed a pattern. When we do have these moments of conflict, he tends to withdraw completely. Whether it's about something small or big, he never really opens up about his feelings, and it feels like I'm the only one trying to resolve things. I don't want to pressure him into talking if he's not ready. But at the same time, I need to feel like my emotions are being validated and that I'm not just a passive participant in our relationship. I guess what I'm wondering now is, how can I communicate better with him? How do I stop second-guessing myself when these situations arise? And how do I make sure my feelings are respected without feeling like I'm nagging or demanding too much? I really care about him, but I can't keep walking on eggshells. I don't want to keep getting hurt over these kinds of situations. Am I the asshole for not inviting a friend and childhood friend to my bachelorette? So, I'm 32F, getting married soon, and I'm currently in the process of planning my wedding. I'm a recovering people pleaser. Well, I'm working on it anyway, and I'm trying to navigate this whole wedding thing without letting my usual tendencies of accommodating others mess with my boundaries. So, bear with me while I go through this self-discovery journey. Long story short, I had a fallout with a friend, 33F, about 2 years ago. She made some questionable decisions that put me in a very uncomfortable situation. I had bailed her out of a DUI the year prior, and then a few months later, she showed up at a party drunk and tried to get my fiancé to give her piggyback rides. At that point, I had had enough. I called her out for being obnoxious, mean, and irresponsible. Instead of understanding where I was coming from, she held a serious grudge against me for the next year and a half. She treated me coldly, and even worse, my other mutual friends started siding with her and distancing themselves from me. I started questioning myself. Was I wrong for standing up for myself? Should I have just let it go? After 2 birthdays of her being hostile and making my fiancé and I feel uncomfortable in group settings, I said, screw that. Eventually, we tried to make peace. Mainly because we have 3 mutual friends, and I didn't want to stir up unnecessary drama during this phase of my life. We haven't had a real falling out, but I'm still not sure I trust her. I forgave her for the sake of peace, but I can't forget how she treated me. I also don't think she truly gets how hurt I was by her actions. Now, here's where things get complicated. I have a childhood friend, 33F, who has stayed close with the girl I had issues with. I feel like I'm obligated to invite her to my bachelorette due to the relationship her parents have with mine. But honestly, our friendship has drifted apart. We barely hang out anymore, and she's been distant. Recently, she's been slowly trying to creep back into my life like nothing happened. She still refers to me as one of her best friends, but when I think about it, I don't feel like she's put in any effort into the friendship. Plus, she's very close with the friend who made me feel like shit for 2 years. They've been talking about my future bachelorette, and honestly, they both seem to expect an invitation. But here's the thing, I can't even begin to imagine having them at my bachelorette. They can be very mean when they get together, and I don't trust that they won't make fun of my other guests or be rude. I've been thinking about how to handle this. I want to make sure that my bachelorette is a day of fun, support, and love with people who are there for me, and I don't want any drama. But I also feel torn because I know excluding these 2 might cause issues, especially with my mom, who doesn't know the full extent of why I feel the way I do. She's been pushing for me to invite my friend, the one I had the fallout with, because she thinks I should forgive and forget. But how can I forget the way she made me feel? Am I the asshole for my husband paying off my credit card? I, 37F, have been married to my husband, 41M, for 8 years. We have a prenup, and for the first 5 years of our marriage, we each paid our half of everything: mortgage, utilities, travel, food, etc. My husband earns $100,000 per year, while I earn $35,000. I was fine with splitting things this way because I want to contribute and am not looking to rely on him financially. 3 years ago, I got pregnant, planned. We had agreed that I would pay for my own medical bills, and he would cover the costs for the kids at birth. Unfortunately, my pregnancy became very complicated. I had to quit working at 16 weeks due to complications, and I was on strict bed rest from 22 to 34 weeks, which drained my savings. Because of this, I had no other choice but to use credit cards to cover my expenses. After I stopped working, my husband took over the full financial responsibility for the household: mortgage, utilities, insurance, etc. I only contributed about $600 per year toward our living expenses. Additionally, we started a shared account for groceries where my husband put $400 a month, Everything else, personal expenses, gas, household items, clothes, toys, hygiene products, gifts, and kids' needs, was my responsibility. However, I was not allowed to buy secondhand items or thrift, even though we're living in a rural area with limited options. We had initially agreed that I would return to work after the babies were born, but after some time, we realized that it wasn't feasible with the demands of the kids and the situation we were in. I've tried various side hustles and online work, but they haven't worked for me due to our location and schedule constraints. My husband does help with the kids and housework, but my primary role has been as a stay-at-home mom, handling everything else. For the past 3 years, I've been living on credit to try and make ends meet. The interest was a huge burden, and it caused me a lot of stress. But I had no other choice. My husband had made it clear that he didn't want me to be a financial burden on him, which made me feel even worse. I did try to pay down the credit card through odd freelance jobs, selling things, and using birthday and Christmas money, but I couldn't keep up. Last month, I was finally unable to make a payment on my credit card. I used my last money for a car battery while my husband was out of town, and when he got back, I had to admit I couldn't keep up with the debt. Over the past 3 years, I had accumulated $13,000 in credit card debt, and I felt deeply ashamed. My husband got understandably mad when I told him. He paid off the balance, but now he is calling me a financial burden, immature, untrustworthy, and even accused me of being a liar. I tried to explain that I've been doing my best and that it's been hard for me to contribute financially given the circumstances, but he said that I had gall to think he owed me anything. He believes I'm failing at my end of the deal, and this has made me feel incredibly guilty. I'm torn. I want to contribute and feel like I'm not a burden, but at the same time, I also feel like I deserve compensation for the hard work I've put into raising our kids and managing our home. On the other hand, he's provided a house, living expenses, and everything else for me and the kids. So I don't know if I'm just being selfish for feeling the way I do. Am I the asshole for snapping at my mother after she missed my graduation? I, 18F, just graduated from high school yesterday, which was a huge moment for me. I've struggled a lot with mental health issues that caused me to miss a year of school, repeat a year, and attend most of my final years online. I'm really proud of myself for how far I've come. I finished this year in second place for most of my subjects. I got an early offer to 2 universities, and I even earned a scholarship. However, my relationship with my mom, 40s, has been strained recently. She has shown a lot of favoritism toward my younger sister, 15F, and has let her treat me horribly without any consequences. For example, my sister once yelled at me while I was having a mental health crisis, and my mom did nothing about it. Yesterday, on graduation day, I went into my mom's room early in the morning, fully dressed, and asked her why she wasn't getting ready. She told me that she had been dealing with a headache for the past 2 days and didn't feel well. I asked her if she would still come to my graduation, and she simply said no. She didn't even say good luck or anything, just continued scrolling on her phone as I walked out. At my graduation, many people asked me where my mom was, and my best friend's parents ended up being the ones to cheer me on. It felt so disappointing that the people who cheered me on during my speech and when I received awards were people I had known for less than a year, rather than my own family. I'm grateful to them for being there, but it still hurt. When I came back home, my mom didn't congratulate me. She didn't even acknowledge my existence until I went into her room later, and she asked me why I was so grumpy. I told her that my feelings were hurt because she didn't come to my graduation. She said, "Sorry, but I don't feel well." I told her that this was a once-in-a-lifetime event and that she had pushed through headaches for my sister before, for much less important things. She's barely spoken to me since. She still hasn't asked me about graduation or showed any interest in how it went. Like she's ignoring me, and I feel really disappointed. Our relationship hasn't been the same for a while, and I miss the connection we used to have. My older sister, 21F, told me I should just let it go since my mom said she was sorry and didn't feel well. But I don't feel like a sorry can fix this. Just 2 months ago, my mom sat in a hot car for an hour after being sick for a week to attend an information session for my younger sister, who didn't even show up. But she couldn't make the effort to attend my 1-hour graduation, which was in an air-conditioned hall. So, AITA for snapping at my mom and feeling hurt over her absence at my graduation? I am scared to break up with my first girlfriend. Hey, I, 25M, started dating a girl from Tinder in August 24F. To give some context, she was my very first. And I mean not just first girlfriend overall, but my first sex partner that I lost virginity with as well. It's not that there is something horribly wrong with me compared to other guys, but I had some high school trauma, and once I didn't lose it at 19 or so, I became afraid of intimacy. I tried not minding too much, but once I finished university, it started driving me mad. Last summer, I even hired a hooker and couldn't get it up because of how stressed out I was. So eventually, extremely desperate, I swiped right on a bigger girl on Tinder that I normally wouldn't do. We started meeting up, and I found that she has similar interests like me in history and D&B/techno events, so I kept it going and thought that maybe we can just work out the physical part. She was eager to start going to the gym with me where I was a regular. Fast forward to now, and the spark is gone. We are still seeing each other in gym, but she always seems like she is just trying to get out of there as soon as possible. Like she is there just for me and not because she wants to, even though she says otherwise. I am not physically attracted at all at this point. We also had a sickness period where we couldn't see each other for about 3 weeks, and she acted extremely insecure and needy every day, and it was just annoying to me. In fact, she is insecure a lot of time, even though I was not doing anything to make her feel that way, and it is extremely unattractive to me. Don't try to hit me with the LOL girls are insecure bro, deal with it stuff, because that is not an excuse. Another problem is her attitude. I am a go-getter. I wake up at 6, travel for almost 2 hours to work and back. I come back after 11, 5 hours, still have time to go get some groceries, still have time to hit gym for at least an hour, still have time to play a bit of video games, take a shower, and even give some time to my side only business I have. Really, really small though, it makes money. Yet this girl has the gall to tell me on her day off, after waking up at 9 a.m. that she doesn't have the time to do everything she wants, which was cook a healthy meal, meet up with friend, paint a picture, and go to gym. Like what? If you asked me, Toady, if this is the girl I want to marry one day, then the answer is no. I feel no attraction physically or mentally, and I'm even trying to get out of having sex lately. But I'm also scared. I feel indebted to her for huge favor she has done to me. Feels wrong to just take and leave. But I also feel that there must be someone better for me out there. Am I the asshole for not telling my mom about the money my aunt is giving me for college? To give you some context, I, 22F, have a very complicated relationship with my mom, 44F, when it comes to finances. She's not bad at her job, but she tends to make really poor financial decisions. For example, after becoming debt-free last year, she bought a $20,000 couch on a loan and then went on a vacation. My stepdad has similar habits, and they both make choices that, in my opinion, aren't very responsible. For instance, he refuses to get a job closer to home, so they pay for an apartment 4 hours away from their actual house. Money has always been a sensitive subject for my mom. One example is when my cousin got a brand new car after high school graduation. My mom cried for days because she couldn't afford to do the same for me. I assured her that I didn't care about that and was fine with the car I had, but she still took it to heart. My aunt, around 40F, on the other hand, has had much better financial luck. She recently came into some money and bought a $900,000 house. She and her boyfriend are in a very comfortable financial position, and she's been super generous with her wealth. We've always been close, and she went to the same university I'm attending now. I've been paying for my tuition and expenses entirely on my own, and while my mom and stepdad have tried to co-sign loans for me, they were denied. So, I've been making it work on my own without much financial help from them. Recently, my aunt took me to lunch and offered to give me her work bonus to help with school. I didn't ask her for it, but she volunteered. She's a CPA, and I know that her bonus will be at least $1,000. I'm very grateful for this, as I only have a year and a half left of school and only $12,000 in student loans so far. Here's where the dilemma comes in. My mom and I are extremely close, and we share everything with each other. But knowing her history with money and how sensitive she is about these things, I feel like if I tell her about my aunt's generous offer, she'll be upset. I know she'll act happy for me in the moment, but deep down, I think it will hurt her that my aunt is able to help me when she hasn't been able to. At the same time, I don't want to keep secrets from my mom, especially since we've always been open with each other. So, here's my question. Am I the asshole for not telling my mom about the money my aunt is giving me for college, just to avoid hurting her feelings? Or would it be better to tell her down the line when the timing feels right? On the brink of divorce, I, 34F, have been dealing with my husband's, 34M, criticism and suspected OCPD. I'm writing this in a state of desperation, hoping for some clarity or to hear if anyone can relate to what I'm going through. My husband, M34, and I, F34, have been together for 9 years, married for 5. Over the past year, we've been on the brink of divorce, and I don't know where to turn anymore. Recently, I started suspecting that my husband might have obsessive-compulsive personality disorder, OCPD, which my therapist has suggested could be at play. This has made me reevaluate everything I've been feeling and experiencing, and I'm hoping some insight from others might help me find clarity. Our relationship has always had its ups and downs, but this last year has been particularly difficult, with frequent conflicts. Sometimes every few days, sometimes daily. Something about our relationship has always felt off to me, though I couldn't put my finger on it until now. My husband is a great person in many ways, emotionally attuned, loving, caring, and considerate. We've had big dreams for the future. Starting a business, having children, and growing old together. However, these plans have remained on hold, as we've spent most of our time trying to work on our relationship, especially with a focus on me. For context, I've been a recovering alcoholic. I was still drinking on and off during our first year together, but after our first anniversary, I quit for good and have been sober ever since. My husband has been an incredible support through that process, but I feel like I'm being continuously scrutinized, not just for my past, but for my ongoing struggles in adjusting to this new identity as a non-drinker. The issue started when I noticed how my husband began to nitpick almost every aspect of our lives, including how I do everyday tasks like making coffee, loading the dishwasher, and even how I walk, talk, or express myself. He often tells me I'm too timid, that I don't speak up enough, and that I'm not assertive enough. Over the years, I've tried my best to work on these things, but it's never been enough. In fact, it's become overwhelming. I recently sat down and made a list of all the things he's criticized me for over the years, and I easily came up with over 100 distinct issues. Things as small as how I express my emotions, the tone of my voice, and the way I interact with people. Everything has been scrutinized. I'm fully aware of my own challenges in relationships. I have an insecure/avoidant attachment style, which has made intimacy and vulnerability difficult for me. I know my struggles in expressing affection and being physically intimate with him have created tension. I've worked hard to understand his love languages, especially physical touch and emotional connection, and tried to show more affection, but every attempt seems to fall short. He criticizes my touch, my attempts at affection, telling me they come off as too unsure, and that it's unappealing. He also says I lack expressiveness and that I don't show love in the way he needs. I've been trying to learn and change, but the constant feedback is exhausting and makes me feel like no matter how hard I try, it's never enough. There have been countless instances where I've tried to compliment him, only for him to thank me but say I didn't express it right. He wants me to communicate better, be more expressive, and speak with more energy. He tells me that I'm too monotone, that my voice lacks inflection, and that I'm not sounding enough. Even when I make significant progress in these areas, his criticism remains constant, and it's become draining. When I make a mistake, whether it's something about my tone, my communication style, or any other minor issue, he's extremely critical, and instead of acknowledging my efforts to improve, he becomes frustrated. What makes this worse is that when I try to share my perspective, especially when I don't agree with his criticism, he completely shuts down. He tells me that I'm the problem, that I've caused him pain for years, and that he doesn't have the patience to hear my side of things. He believes that his feedback is objective and that my perspective is invalid, and he refuses to take any responsibility for his own role in our issues. I'm constantly told that I'm at fault for everything in the relationship because I lack basic communication and emotional connection skills. The impact this constant criticism has had on me over the years has been profound. My self-esteem is in tatters, and I often feel completely unlovable. He's told me that if he had known how broken I was, he probably wouldn't have gotten into a relationship with me in the first place. This has left me feeling rejected, defective, and emotionally drained. Recently, in one of our arguments, he called me stupid and an idiot for not agreeing with him, saying I can't understand basic logic. When I tried to explain how hurtful these comments were, he said it was inhumane for me to deny him the right to express himself, even if it's damaging to me. I'm struggling with whether this constant criticism is an effect of OCPD or if we're just stuck in a toxic, unhealthy relationship dynamic. He's often fixated on having things done in a very specific way, whether it's daily routines or interpersonal interactions. He's also become very judgmental of other people, cutting out friends and family members because they don't live up to his standards. He's even said he has had OCD-like tendencies when he was younger, but he doesn't seem to think it's an issue now. For the past couple of years, the emotional toll of living under this scrutiny has been unbearable. I feel like no matter what I do, it's never enough. Even when I try to meet his needs, it's as if nothing I do is ever right. I've explained how his behavior is damaging to me, but it always seems to fall on deaf ears. I'm constantly blamed for everything and made to feel like I'm the cause of all of our issues. The worst part is, after yet another fight over a mistake I made, he's now refused to speak to me for over 2 weeks. I've tried reaching out a few times, extending olive branches, but he continues to shut me down. I don't know if I'm just in denial or if I'm missing something, but I feel emotionally drained, unworthy of love, and completely lost in this relationship. I know we've had our good moments, but I wonder if this constant cycle of criticism, rejection, and emotional neglect is something I can keep enduring. I'm exhausted by the idea that everything falls on me and that my efforts are never enough. So, here I am, looking for any kind of insight or advice. Could my husband have OCPD? Are we just in a terrible dynamic that can't be fixed? Has anyone been through something similar? Am I misinterpreting everything, or is this really a situation where I'm being emotionally gaslit and neglected? I just don't know what to do anymore, and I feel lost. On the brink of divorce, I, 34F, have been dealing with my husband's, 34M, criticism and suspected OCPD. I'm writing this in a state of desperation, hoping for some clarity or to hear if anyone can relate to what I'm going through. My husband, M34, and I, F34, have been together for 9 years, married for 5. Over the past year, we've been on the brink of divorce, and I don't know where to turn anymore. Recently, I started suspecting that my husband might have obsessive-compulsive personality disorder, OCPD, which my therapist has suggested could be at play. This has made me reevaluate everything I've been feeling and experiencing, and I'm hoping some insight from others might help me find clarity. Our relationship has always had its ups and downs, but this last year has been particularly difficult, with frequent conflicts. Sometimes every few days, sometimes daily. Something about our relationship has always felt off to me, though I couldn't put my finger on it until now. My husband is a great person in many ways, emotionally attuned, loving, caring, and considerate. We've had big dreams for the future. Starting a business, having children, and growing old together. However, these plans have remained on hold, as we've spent most of our time trying to work on our relationship, especially with a focus on me. For context, I've been a recovering alcoholic. I was still drinking on and off during our first year together, but after our first anniversary, I quit for good and have been sober ever since. My husband has been an incredible support through that process, but I feel like I'm being continuously scrutinized, not just for my past, but for my ongoing struggles in adjusting to this new identity as a non-drinker. The issue started when I noticed how my husband began to nitpick almost every aspect of our lives, including how I do everyday tasks like making coffee, loading the dishwasher, and even how I walk, talk, or express myself. He often tells me I'm too timid, that I don't speak up enough, and that I'm not assertive enough. Over the years, I've tried my best to work on these things, but it's never been enough. In fact, it's become overwhelming. I recently sat down and made a list of all the things he's criticized me for over the years, and I easily came up with over 100 distinct issues. Things as small as how I express my emotions, the tone of my voice, and the way I interact with people. Everything has been scrutinized. I'm fully aware of my own challenges in relationships. I have an insecure/avoidant attachment style, which has made intimacy and vulnerability difficult for me. I know my struggles in expressing affection and being physically intimate with him have created tension. I've worked hard to understand his love languages, especially physical touch and emotional connection, and tried to show more affection, but every attempt seems to fall short. He criticizes my touch, my attempts at affection, telling me they come off as too unsure, and that it's unappealing. He also says I lack expressiveness and that I don't show love in the way he needs. I've been trying to learn and change, but the constant feedback is exhausting and makes me feel like no matter how hard I try, it's never enough. There have been countless instances where I've tried to compliment him, only for him to thank me but say I didn't express it right. He wants me to communicate better, be more expressive, and speak with more energy. He tells me that I'm too monotone, that my voice lacks inflection, and that I'm not sounding enough. Even when I make significant progress in these areas, his criticism remains constant, and it's become draining. When I make a mistake, whether it's something about my tone, my communication style, or any other minor issue, he's extremely critical, and instead of acknowledging my efforts to improve, he becomes frustrated. What makes this worse is that when I try to share my perspective, especially when I don't agree with his criticism, he completely shuts down. He tells me that I'm the problem, that I've caused him pain for years, and that he doesn't have the patience to hear my side of things. He believes that his feedback is objective and that my perspective is invalid, and he refuses to take any responsibility for his own role in our issues. I'm constantly told that I'm at fault for everything in the relationship because I lack basic communication and emotional connection skills. The impact this constant criticism has had on me over the years has been profound. My self-esteem is in tatters, and I often feel completely unlovable. He's told me that if he had known how broken I was, he probably wouldn't have gotten into a relationship with me in the first place. This has left me feeling rejected, defective, and emotionally drained. Recently, in one of our arguments, he called me stupid and an idiot for not agreeing with him, saying I can't understand basic logic. When I tried to explain how hurtful these comments were, he said it was inhumane for me to deny him the right to express himself, even if it's damaging to me. I'm struggling with whether this constant criticism is an effect of OCPD or if we're just stuck in a toxic, unhealthy relationship dynamic. He's often fixated on having things done in a very specific way, whether it's daily routines or interpersonal interactions. He's also become very judgmental of other people, cutting out friends and family members because they don't live up to his standards. He's even said he has had OCD-like tendencies when he was younger, but he doesn't seem to think it's an issue now. For the past couple of years, the emotional toll of living under this scrutiny has been unbearable. I feel like no matter what I do, it's never enough. Even when I try to meet his needs, it's as if nothing I do is ever right. I've explained how his behavior is damaging to me, but it always seems to fall on deaf ears. I'm constantly blamed for everything and made to feel like I'm the cause of all of our issues. The worst part is, after yet another fight over a mistake I made, he's now refused to speak to me for over 2 weeks. I've tried reaching out a few times, extending olive branches, but he continues to shut me down. I don't know if I'm just in denial or if I'm missing something, but I feel emotionally drained, unworthy of love, and completely lost in this relationship. I know we've had our good moments, but I wonder if this constant cycle of criticism, rejection, and emotional neglect is something I can keep enduring. I'm exhausted by the idea that everything falls on me and that my efforts are never enough. So, here I am, looking for any kind of insight or advice. Could my husband have OCPD? Are we just in a terrible dynamic that can't be fixed? Has anyone been through something similar? Am I misinterpreting everything, or is this really a situation where I'm being emotionally gaslit and neglected? I just don't know what to do anymore, and I feel lost. We were death partners before we were friends. The day we met some 30 years ago, I was so pregnant with my first child. I resembled an overstuffed sausage about to burst its casing. I'd forsaken style weeks earlier when my shoes no longer fit. I couldn't even reach around my massive torso to shave my legs, limbs sporting enough hair to scrape clean a barbecue grill. You, on the other hand, had just wrapped up an open house and strode across my threshold for the first time, like a seasoned runway model. I'll never forget your chic, black pencil skirt, topped with one of those mustard-hued real estate jackets you somehow made fashionable, while pivoting on heels resembling knitting needles. Your cropped, platinum hair parenthesized the diamond studs that shimmered from your ears. Your teeth were straight and white as a toothpaste commercial. I caught the subtle scent of an expensive perfume. The last fragrance I'd worn was surreptitiously torn from a magazine in my obstetrician's office. Our husbands, officers and gentlemen of the highest caliber, lost all decorum, leaving us post-introductions in the foyer, off to the den to watch football. Afraid they'll miss a Doritos commercial. You winked at me. "I'm so envious," you said. "You look amazing." I caught a hint of a southern accent. I stepped forward and stumbled over nothing, as usual, and you gracefully caught me. "Sorry, I'm so clumsy these days." "Istutiel." "Oh, darling." I trip going upstairs. A loose cord my foot inevitably tangles in it. "I get it, and I don't have a bowling ball around my abdomen." You took my elbow. "Here, let me help you. Kitchen's good. Let's sit in the kitchen. If weasels could talk, they'd sound like me." You seemed so sincere. I could have wept in gratitude, but lately I cried at tissue commercials. This get-together was our husband's idea. It made me very nervous, the entire reason we needed to meet. Spooning one night with Jimmy, my only go-to position those pregnant days, he broached the subject. At first, I was incensed at the entire morbid concept. Jimmy had chosen you and Ken had chosen me. While he twisted a random strand of my hair, he went on to explain that your dad had been a CIA agent, and you personally knew the likes of Oprah and Hillary. I'll admit I was intrigued. He added that, at some point, you'd owned an upscale bar in Georgetown and fell for Ken, a fighter pilot, years your junior, and gave up all that DC glamour for places named Raison and Beeville. I was fascinated by the idea of you, so I agreed. Ken and Jimmy were more than just fighter pilots stationed in the same squadron. They'd become close friends, having spent the previous 6 months together on an aircraft carrier in the middle of the Mediterranean Sea. Our meeting was essential to the cause. Technically speaking, we were an assignment of theirs which they mandatorily had to carry out. Their detachments were intensifying. They needed us to like each other. Meanwhile, you cursed like a pirate, housed enough gossip to warrant your own radio show, and fiercely loved your man. Within a half hour, I was putty in your palms. We laughed about things as if we'd been friends for years. You made the extreme business at hand less overwhelming. While the guys watched television, we sat in my tiny, sunny kitchen and reviewed the government-issued paperwork in front of us. Form DD 193 was mandatory for married officers in Special Ops. Signing these forms meant one of us would be present if the other was informed her husband was killed in action. You and I were total strangers discussing a contract where we'd bear witness to each other's worst nightmare. Before signing, you took my hands in yours. "I know we just met, but you need to know something." Your tone was hushed, your hands warm, and momentarily, I was both comforted and confused. If uniforms show up at my door flanking you, I'll know because they only come in person if your husband is dead. Injured, they'll call. And let's get real, who simply gets injured should something go awry in a jet traveling 1,500 miles an hour. You sighed and I felt myself stiffen. "I feel obligated to inform you before you sign on. Should I see you at my door, flanked by uniforms, I will simply excuse myself, get Ken's gun, put the barrel in my mouth and pull the trigger. Discussion is off the table." I gasped. I knew you less than an afternoon and you were serious. You continued, "Something about Ken being your universe, not wanting to live in a world without him. Promise never to tell anyone, especially Jimmy." In utter shock, I reluctantly nodded. You let go of my sweaty palms, flamboyantly scratched your signature on the bottom of your copy of DD 193, grinned and slid it over as though you just sold me a duplex. That day, we passed bits of ourselves back and forth like poker chips. I was intoxicated by your this and that of such minutiae as your latest guacamole recipe, the upcoming masquerade gala, and the commander's wife who thinks she shits ice cream. Yet somehow, I read through your gregariousness. At one point you asked to touch my belly, because all you really wanted to know was what it felt like to be pregnant. I placed your delicate hand on the wave of my abdomen. Something more than my baby swelled inside me that afternoon. It was the seedling of our friendship. Early on, you confided in me that you couldn't have children. Your mother had taken a prescribed drug during her only pregnancy that ultimately killed the poor woman and robbed you of a mom and a uterus. I felt pain in my heart, to my very core. I had no words, not like you. All I said was, "You'd make an amazing mom." I wish I'd told you then that I was honored to share my children with you. I'd even consider having one for you. But I knew you'd have straight up asked me if you wanted my help, even my viable uterus. And I'd have said, yes. With the certainty I did when Jimmy proposed. When Jimmy and I met in college at 17, he was determined to be a pilot. A true benevolent warrior. He spared spiders, built surprise snow families in the middle of the night, and under his breath whispered 2 points when anything he tossed landed in the trash can. I melted in his arms when his hugs lifted me off the ground. And Jimmy was born to fly. I accepted long ago, as all pilots' wives do, that our husband's first love would always be flight. Over time, the more I understood you, the more your suicide plan simultaneously fascinated and troubled me. Killing myself wasn't an option. I was a mom. But what if I wasn't? Did my not wanting to take that eternal journey with Jimmy mean I loved him less than you loved Ken? Or did it mean I loved myself more than I loved Jimmy? At 24 years old, I hadn't a clue. In the waning hours of lonely nights, I devised intricate scenarios should I have to deliver that fatal news to you. According to Form DD 193, I'd get the call, then I'd be officially escorted door to door, somehow to your whereabouts. I imagined myself physically restraining you. Having garnered strength from childbirth, I'd have a small advantage over you in your stilettos, but I couldn't hang on to you like a chimp indefinitely. Another plan involved somehow confiscating Ken's gun. One afternoon during lunch, I broached the subject of the firearm. Doesn't having that gun in the house frighten you? You shouldn't own a gun unless you know how to use it. Let's go to a range and practice. I'll go with. Your response was not something one soon forgets. I don't need practice when the only target is inside my own mouth. And that was that. While our husbands deployed over those long weeks and months, you and I ran the gamut of emotions. I soon realized that you missed Ken more than I had room to miss Jimmy. Our differences made us a unique pair. In the end, you found family with me. I found my soulmate in you. Am I the asshole for not telling a man that the research he was mansplaining to me was my own? I don't usually post on Reddit, so forgive me if I mess this up, but I could really use some perspective here. I'm a 33-year-old woman working in a very specific, niche field that's male-dominated. I'm not going to name the exact field because it's very technical, and I don't want to accidentally reveal my identity, but let's just say it's a subcategory of law. I've been in the field for 9 years now. We have a different education system where I'm from, so I studied for 5 years, and I'm both a practicing lawyer and a researcher. I've published a bit here and there, though nothing huge or widely known. Most people outside the field don't know about my work. Yesterday, I went out with a few friends to a bar, and they introduced me to one of their other friends who works in the same field as I do. I was actually excited to meet him, because it's pretty rare to find someone who works in the same niche area. He's not exactly a lawyer like I am. He's a legal advisor. But we're both involved in similar topics, so naturally we started talking about our work. We eventually started debating a specific issue that we had differing opinions on. I explained my perspective, and that's when he said something that immediately set me off. He told me that my opinion was based on nothing, and that his was based on the work of a professional. He was referencing a paper that he claimed was written by an expert. And you guessed it, it was my paper. He started to mansplain my own work to me, explaining it in a way that was not only wrong, but also showed that he clearly hadn't read it carefully at all. He completely missed the point of my research. I tried to ask him if he was sure that's what the author meant, and he confidently told me, "It's pretty simple actually." Then, for the next 20 minutes, he went on explaining my research as if he were teaching it to a first-year law student. To be honest, I found the whole thing pretty funny. I didn't say anything because I knew he was completely wrong, and I was curious to see how long he would go on, especially since he was saying everything with so much confidence. Eventually, the conversation shifted to other topics, and the night went on. But right before I left, I decided to tell him that I was actually the one who wrote the work he had just spent the last 20 minutes misrepresenting. He didn't take it well at all. In fact, he got really angry. He yelled at me, saying I had manipulated him and humiliated him on purpose. He said that I should have told him earlier that it was my work instead of letting him go on like that. I wasn't sure how to respond, so I just told him that he had embarrassed himself and walked away. This morning, I woke up to a bunch of texts from my friends saying I was in the wrong. They told me that I caused unnecessary drama and tension, and that I could have been nicer to their friend. They said I should have told him at the beginning that it was my work instead of letting him make a fool of himself. But I'm honestly not sure. Yes, I could have told him right away, but is it really that big of a deal that I didn't? I wasn't trying to humiliate him, and to me, the whole thing seemed like a classic case of mansplaining. So, I'm wondering, am I the asshole here? Edit. I just wanted to clarify something that seems to be a point of confusion. The conversation about my work was only between the two of us. We were talking privately, and no one else was involved. My friends weren't around when I told him I was the author, so it wasn't like I was publicly embarrassing him or calling him out in front of a group. The only thing embarrassing for him seems to be the fact that a woman knew more than him, and I suspect that's why he reacted so poorly. Am I the asshole for not telling a man that the research he was mansplaining to me was my own? I don't usually post on Reddit, so forgive me if I mess this up, but I could really use some perspective here. I'm a 33-year-old woman working in a very specific, niche field that's male-dominated. I'm not going to name the exact field because it's very technical, and I don't want to accidentally reveal my identity, but let's just say it's a subcategory of law. I've been in the field for 9 years now. We have a different education system where I'm from, so I studied for 5 years, and I'm both a practicing lawyer and a researcher. I've published a bit here and there, though nothing huge or widely known. Most people outside the field don't know about my work. Yesterday, I went out with a few friends to a bar, and they introduced me to one of their other friends who works in the same field as I do. I was actually excited to meet him, because it's pretty rare to find someone who works in the same niche area. He's not exactly a lawyer like I am. He's a legal advisor. But we're both involved in similar topics, so naturally we started talking about our work. We eventually started debating a specific issue that we had differing opinions on. I explained my perspective, and that's when he said something that immediately set me off. He told me that my opinion was based on nothing, and that his was based on the work of a professional. He was referencing a paper that he claimed was written by an expert. And you guessed it, it was my paper. He started to mansplain my own work to me, explaining it in a way that was not only wrong, but also showed that he clearly hadn't read it carefully at all. He completely missed the point of my research. I tried to ask him if he was sure that's what the author meant, and he confidently told me, "It's pretty simple actually." Then, for the next 20 minutes, he went on explaining my research as if he were teaching it to a first-year law student. To be honest, I found the whole thing pretty funny. I didn't say anything because I knew he was completely wrong, and I was curious to see how long he would go on, especially since he was saying everything with so much confidence. Eventually, the conversation shifted to other topics, and the night went on. But right before I left, I decided to tell him that I was actually the one who wrote the work he had just spent the last 20 minutes misrepresenting. He didn't take it well at all. In fact, he got really angry. He yelled at me, saying I had manipulated him and humiliated him on purpose. He said that I should have told him earlier that it was my work instead of letting him go on like that. I wasn't sure how to respond, so I just told him that he had embarrassed himself and walked away. This morning, I woke up to a bunch of texts from my friends saying I was in the wrong. They told me that I caused unnecessary drama and tension, and that I could have been nicer to their friend. They said I should have told him at the beginning that it was my work instead of letting him make a fool of himself. But I'm honestly not sure. I mean, yes, I could have told him right away, but is it really that big of a deal that I didn't? I wasn't trying to humiliate him, and to me, the whole thing seemed like a classic case of mansplaining. So, I'm wondering, am I the asshole here? Edit. I just wanted to clarify something that seems to be a point of confusion. The conversation about my work was only between the two of us. We were talking privately, and no one else was involved. My friends weren't around when I told him I was the author, so it wasn't like I was publicly embarrassing him or calling him out in front of a group. The only thing embarrassing for him seems to be the fact that a woman knew more than him, and I suspect that's why he reacted so poorly. Am I the asshole for telling my friends that it's not my problem they can't afford things? I, 33M, Australia, have been friends with the same group of people since high school. Over the years, we've all taken different paths. Some of my friends chose to skip further education and went straight into trades or factory work. A few are still hopping between part-time jobs. Personally, I decided to go to university while also working in the industry I was studying for, which gave me a jumpstart in my career. After graduating, I landed a well-paying job, $80K annually, which was already more than what most of my friends were earning. For a while, I had to listen to comments from my friends saying I just got lucky with my job, which I thought was dismissive of the hard work I'd put in. Over time, though, these comments faded and I didn't pay much attention to them. Now, fast forward to last week. I had my friends over to see my new house, something I'd worked hard for, having built it from the ground up. I'm currently single with no kids or pets, and I've been able to afford a lifestyle I'm happy with due to my career progression. This was the first time they had seen my new place, and the comments started up again. They said I was lucky to be able to afford such a big house, that all I do is sit around all day and get paid a lot, and so on. I had hoped to show them my achievement, but it started to sour my mood. The comments just wouldn't stop. Eventually, I snapped and told them, "It's not my fault that you're too lazy to do anything with your life. If you actually put in some effort, you wouldn't have to struggle just to go out or buy things. If you worked as hard as I did, you'd be able to have nice things too." Some of my friends left because they were angry, and the rest stayed, understanding where I was coming from. They weren't the ones making the comments. Since then, things have been a bit tense. The group chats have gone quiet, and no one has made any plans for Christmas or New Year's yet. One of my friends has suggested I wait and see if they apologize before I do, but I'm thinking about reaching out to apologize to keep the peace. So, am I the asshole for saying what I did? Am I the asshole for proposing in a way that wasn't up to my girlfriend's expectations and refusing to redo it? I, 21M, have been in a relationship with my girlfriend, 21F, for 6 years. We've always talked about getting married in the future, and it was something we both agreed on. Over the Thanksgiving weekend, I planned a surprise trip to Hawaii to propose to her. I had asked her parents for their blessing beforehand and was genuinely excited about this moment. I knew she wanted something grand, like a proposal with big letters on the beach, rose petals, mariachi bands, and all the other flashy elements you often see on TikTok or Instagram. While I was open to this idea, the logistics of doing it in Hawaii, a place neither of us had been to before, just didn't work out. I thought this trip would be a great, intimate opportunity for us to celebrate our relationship. We got to Hawaii, and I had planned to propose on the first day we arrived. But after some arguments and tensions, I decided to hold off. I didn't want to propose after a rough day, so I decided to wait for another opportunity. The second day, we went parasailing, and I didn't want to risk losing the ring, so I left it at the hotel. We didn't get back to the hotel until later, and by that point, it was already dark. She had mentioned wanting a sunset proposal, but the timing didn't work out, so we just went out for dinner and drinks. We came back to the hotel and she was tired, so I convinced her to go for a walk on the beach at 10:30 p.m. This was the moment I planned to propose. The beach was beautiful. The city lights shone in the distance, and the moonlit ocean made it feel intimate and special. I began telling her how much I loved her and how I wanted to spend the rest of my life with her. And just as I reached into my pocket for the ring, She stopped me and said, "I hope you're not about to propose right now. This isn't what I expected." I was devastated. I got up, speechless, and walked back to the hotel. I told her we would talk about it the next day. The following day, we had a conversation, and she insisted that I redo the proposal the right way. She wanted me to wait until sunset and make it grand, with all the elements she had envisioned: big letters, a beautiful setting, and everything else. I told her that I couldn't do that because she had already rejected my initial proposal. She insisted that she hadn't rejected it, but that it just wasn't how she had imagined it. Over the next 4 days in Hawaii, we were in a very tense state, but we tried to push through until we got back home. I found myself questioning whether I could stay with her after this, but I didn't want to jump to conclusions just yet. The day after we got back home, she went to stay with her parents for the night. When she came back, we had another conversation. She was still adamant that I failed to meet her expectations. She also told me that a proposal is solely about the woman and what she wants. This didn't sit right with me. I understand that a proposal should be meaningful and that it's an important moment, but I feel like it's something we should both be a part of creating. She had expressed in the past that she wanted something intimate and personal, away from the public. But suddenly, she was expecting something elaborate and publicized, based on trends from social media. What bothers me even more is that she says I made the trip seem like just another vacation, nothing special. But this was literally our first ever vacation together, our first flight together, and we had so many amazing experiences. Parasailing, brunch, a fantastic dinner. And yet, because I didn't give her the big, dramatic proposal she envisioned, she felt let down. In another conversation, she told me she wanted the dog to be there for the proposal, which was news to me. She has always said she wants her dog to be the ring bearer at our wedding, but I had no idea she also wanted him there for the proposal itself. I didn't take the dog with us to Hawaii, and I'm just frustrated that she was so focused on these details, rather than just being happy that I wanted to spend my life with her. Update: after everything that happened, we finally had the breakup talk. Here's the thing, my girlfriend has always been a bit self-centered. I've known this, and I've been able to put up with it for the most part. But recently, about 4 months ago, she started going to therapy. I've noticed some changes in her behavior. She's become more compassionate and cooperative with me. I was hopeful that this new mindset would last, and I was ready to commit to her fully, believing that the issues we had would improve with time. When I explained the situation to her, she said she talked with her therapist about the proposal. Her therapist asked her, "Do you like surprises?" She said yes, and the therapist reminded her that if I truly loved her, I would try to do something heartfelt and unscripted, not something staged or extravagant. The proposal I planned wasn't about the show or spectacle. It was about us two, sharing a moment together. She apologized, saying that she regretted how she reacted and that she would have said yes anyway. But my biggest regret is that I'll never know what she would have said if she had been truly present and open to the moment. The way she dismissed me at the time, so coldly and disrespectfully, left me feeling hurt and disrespected. I'm standing my ground now. I've swallowed my pride and tried to make things work so many times before. This time, though, I can't do it anymore. She's packing her things, and I'll be sleeping on the couch. It's over. I proposed to my girlfriend of 6 years during a trip to Hawaii, but she rejected my proposal because it didn't meet her expectations for a grand, social media-worthy proposal. She insisted I redo it, but I feel like I can't move forward with her after this. We've broken up now, and I'm questioning if I was wrong for expecting a more genuine reaction instead of the spectacle she wanted. Alice was everywhere until she wasn't. Just like at first, she was nowhere until she was. The absence of her before I knew she existed was nothing. Now, the absence of her shrouds everything. Like a guest who never came to dinner. A stormy sky that didn't deliver. Nothing can wash away the void where she used to be. This is what I'm thinking about the first time I take the walk without her. I met Alice at a dinner party. The raucous kind with wild guests, beautiful people glittering in late summer air on a second-floor balcony backlit by a September sky. We were all friends of Richard, and this was his brilliant attempt to make all the people I love come together. Or it was a lavish birthday party thrown for himself. You could never quite tell with Richard. He was my hairdresser, but I was included among the people he loved the most, and so was Alice. From across the table, her eyes kept locking mine with interest, hers large and dark and layered with mischief. Her husband was older, serene, a balm to her boisterousness. I know you from somewhere, she'd said that night when there was both sweltering heat and a prelude of autumn in the air. We sipped deep, earthy Bordeaux and had the getting to know you conversation. The what do you do, are you married, do you have kids variety. A week later, on my morning run with Copper, I ran into Alice again, and now we knew. This is where I see you. We both exclaimed it as we came into each other's space on the trail, the wide, flat former track bed for trains. Copper panted at my side, not used to the interruption in our run. Alice was delighted. Although she didn't run, I agreed to slow it to a power walk and change direction, pulling a confused Copper along. The winds shifted, the weather and my life simultaneously. I had been passing Alice on the trail forever. Her Nordic ponytail, so blonde it was nearly white, had been in my peripheral vision for years. In the winter, she was encapsulated in bright, good quality warmth. Red Patagonia outerwear and a multicolored hat from another dimension. Such was the insanity of its pattern. Her body was fit and lithe, ageless, from a lifetime of the walk. The walk is so important, she'd tell me, but she didn't have to tell me. I stopped running, and my knees responded with finally. For the love of God, stop trying to break us. You aren't young anymore. Alice, who I had flown by in summers before, barely noticing her, became my near daily companion, and without the run, the walk became essential. My knees, at age 40, were dissolving like broken concrete, but I still needed the exercise and, as it turns out, the companionship. We figured out that winter we'd been passing each other more places than the trail. We had circled each other forever, near collisions and missed encounters. Richard was the hub that had put us on the balcony that night. Richard, who collected people like trophies, beautiful and successful ones. His Instagram had thousands of followers. But he doesn't really have friends, you know? Alice observed, and I agreed. Richard was a perpetuator of vanity posting and humble brags. King of the selfie with #NoFilter. In person, you could see the ruddy undertones of his skin, and his bleached hair wasn't quite so effervescent. His need to be complimented was painfully obvious, like a giant cut that oozed blood and begged for stitches. We discussed Richard at length, chiding ourselves for gossip, but agreeing what we talked about on the walk stayed on the walk. It wasn't only Richard. Soon, we discovered that we'd both worked in the same office building for years. She, the owner of a tiny, liberal magazine. She had sat on comfy couches in jeans and sweaters, drinking herbal tea and brainstorming how to get her writers to be better on the 4th floor. One level down, I had worn tailored suits in muted, professional colors, dove gray, classic black, the occasional cobalt blue. My hair was perfectly coiffed, thanks to Richard, and I wore red lipstick and heels and traded stocks for rich people while advising them how to invest their life. We must have seen each other a million times. I racked my memory, trying to find one in which Alice and I ride in the elevator together. I would have everything tightly in my leather bag, some feminized version of a briefcase, clasped with both hands in front of me, mentally running through the daily to-do list that forever plagued me. Alice would have been in leggings, a messenger bag slung over her body, and a cardboard container with coffees for all her employees. No, memory came, but we could not get over how wild the universe was. We had shared that space for just under 7 years, before Alice sold the magazine and retired, and before I quit my job when I was faced with dragons to slay in the form of a mental breakdown. But it wasn't just work and Richard. We soon realized that we had both been at the wedding of Cassidy and Brian, who had also attended Richard's party. Brian was a colleague of mine. I had known him for years. Cassidy was Alice's neighbor before she married Brian. Both of us had frequently double-dated with them. Alice and the Zen husband who was placid like a golden retriever on tranquilizers. Me and David before he died. We were a good year into the walk before I talked about David. Before I told Alice the story of how we were together forever, pushing off marriage because we were focused on our careers. Someday, we'd said, passing like strangers in the night, as I left for work and he stumbled home from his life as an ER doctor. On the walk, one day I break down so violently we have to stop. It's been 2 years since David died. It's been 1 year since I walked away from my job in an attempt to salvage myself. It's been just under 1 year since I stopped running and started walking with Alice. She doesn't say anything, and even Copper lies down on the path. He's a Vizsla, and he's already pissed about not running anymore, but he's the only one who has ever been born witness to this level of rawness. Alice doesn't say a word, and for this I fall in love with her. I have put up a wall between myself and every other well-meaning person in my life who has tried to compartmentalize my feelings, to attach names like grief or anger to the gaping hole in my life, as if the space where David lived could be defined, as if they could quantify what it meant to lose him. After that day, Alice asks me only once about David, and it's only his name. I tell her, and her eyes grow wide and she stops the walk to tell me that she was married before the Zen husband for a long time, and that one day he had a heart attack, as workaholic men do, and the ER doctor who tried to save him was named Dr. David Cross. Was it him? She asks me, tears glistening like a lighthouse beacon, flavored with something far away. I nod, rapt with hunger to hear of the moment when Alice met David. She tells me how it went down, how very young the doctor seemed, how he also cried, blinked back tears as he sat in the room with her, the one where they took people to tell them that their loved one didn't make it. David often came home with the broken heart of a man trying to meld science and God. So often he laid his head on me, told me a story, a mother falling to her knees, a husband, a wife. I tried to extract the memory. So sure was I that he must have cried into my hair one dark morning about Alice. Must have told me about the beautiful blonde woman with the supple body that had fully expected her husband to make it. My God, it's like we were supposed to meet. Alice recovers from the brief trip back in time to a place where darkness kept her isolated until the Zen husband materialized. It was like Dorothy arriving in Kansas when he did. It wasn't home. Not exactly, but everything was beautiful and colorful and magical again. Most of the walks were not so deep. Alice was older than me, a young septuagenarian. She was certain I'd fall in love again. So much so that she told me not to worry about it and to let her handle it. I laughed and indulged her, saying yes when she suggested we take the walk into her neighborhood, because there's a very, very cute man who lives on the corner, and I've already told him I have a hot stockbroker friend. We did the walk in all the seasons. Winter was Alice's favorite, when the air was the cleanest and Copper shone like fire against the snow. Alice convinced me to let him loose, assuring me that once he was free, he would never leave. Her logic made no sense, and yet she was right. After nearly a decade of straining on his leash, Copper took a few laps and returns to us, contentedly sniffing along. Summer was my favorite, with the sun that turned. I did it because I liked the way it made me feel. The transaction pleased me even before the idea became a reality. The seesaw of our friendship now tipped in my favor. I, the one swinging her legs loftily, gripping the handles with sweaty palms, looking down on her smiling face as she crouched uncomfortably, waiting for her turn to rise. I did it because 23 years of knowing and loving Emma had taught me that she was regarded as the kinder and uncompromising one. She, the one who went the extra mile. She, the one to outdo me with birthday surprises, gifts, encouragement. And even when I tried to balance the scales, it just somehow didn't land in the way I wanted. Like the time I got her a pricey bottle of wine I could have sworn she'd mentioned, only to remember weeks later that Malbec wasn't her favorite. She drank it anyway. Or the time I got us both tickets for the Sky Garden and completely forgot she wasn't a huge fan of heights. I took my brother instead. She had sat with me through long evenings, as I moaned about work, my lovely but predictable husband, Alastair, or our 2 tweens, her godchildren, and their personal dramas. I occasionally managed to return the favor and assumed the same posture for her as she shared her heartache at yet another broken relationship, another hope deferred, another wasted chapter. She would come round to mine after work, help me clear the kitchen, chat for a bit with whichever child of mine would reciprocate. Then we would sit, drink, and laugh, always bloody laughing, those two, as my dad used to say of us. But more and more, the laughs turned to tears from Emma, the wretched admission of loneliness, the restless longing for motherhood. I would find her gazing blankly at our walls studded with family portraits, our collective joy recklessly goading her. I loved her, and in between the chaos of my life, I longed to be better, do better, for her. The idea to save Emma would begin as a germ, something I conceived following a radio interview. Then after that, a magazine article. 2 grinning faces, a baby in arms, a cameo of sacrificial love. I sent a link to Emma one sunny afternoon. I remember loitering over the send button for a good while. She called back within the hour, her voice swelling with emotion, great sobs flowing through the lines to me. I felt the waves of gratitude. I made jokes about Alastair's DNA, and was she completely sure she wanted it? I cried with her, made sure she could tell I was crying too, sharing it with her, made sure she knew my arms were open, and this gift, his gift, was hers for the taking. And what would be would be. We would take it step by step, approach the altar together, humble ourselves before the gods, and wait with bated breath to see if they were pleased with our offering. Then came the hurdles. Research. I made a file, speaking with a clinician, understanding our rights. I even called a lawyer friend. Alastair was unsure to begin with, but noticeably did not fly off the handle. There was a chink, I could sense it. I started showering him with online testimonials, a book on the basics. We watched a movie which was strikingly relatable. It made us cry, and he started to get on board. He was always more altruistic than me, and I had to admit that his growing compassion for Emma and his determination to help was actually really attractive to me. But really the final nail in the coffin was going round for dinner at hers, just the 3 of us. She cooked Alastair's favorite lamb tagine, and had really gone to town, right down to little bowls of pomegranate seeds, flatbread, his favorite lager. Looking back, she had even gone to town on herself. She looked more radiant, more composed, better than I'd seen her for months. The grief of her singleness had been slowly desiccating her, and she'd kind of started looking older, though I never would have said it to her. She had even been favoring more comfortable, dated clothes that hung off her, shroud-like. But that night was different. She had clearly gone out to get new clothes, had her hair and nails done. She looked good, but more than that, her face carried something beautiful and bright, and it was hard to not keep staring at her. We ate more again, crept the conversation around the elephant in the room, and got through more drink than was good for us. Dessert came and went, again, AL's favorite. By the time the coffee came out, which none of us really needed, we were cackling with laughter about some stupid anecdote. One of Alastair's colleagues was close to getting fired for his absolute lack of social skills. The evening itself closed in around us, and we were left with the inevitable. I had chosen to sit next to Emma so she wouldn't feel spare, out of habit, but it afforded me the chance to watch Al as she started breaking down, her words rushing out along with the years of longing. As she spoke, I couldn't help but be moved, and was prompted often to rub her back, her hand, her tears provoking my own. It was a familiar scene, one hunched in sorrow, unbothered now by appearances, and the other in a position of quiet giving, of comfort and empathy and tissues and tea. So it was interesting to me to finally observe Alastair's reactions. He was clearly moved, and his eyes never left her lovely face. The only times he locked eyes with me, I could feel him saying, "Now I understand." By the time it was midnight, we had all 3 of us come to a decision. Emma waved us off at the door after long goodbyes, eyes still wet, her whole person shimmering with hope and maybe a touch of fear. Alastair and I walked home, and through the talk between us I could feel his brimming sense of achievement, his sense of wonder. He had deposited so much faith with his words alone, with a single promise. He was at times, I could see in the lamplight, actually smiling. I knew, as only a wife could know, that he was charged, illuminated by the power of his gift. And more than that he'd been touched by her brokenness, had noticed her new beauty. For myself, I was quiet mostly, taking it all in. I felt justifiably full in so many ways. I was experiencing that gorgeous elevation, my idea, my faith, my sacrificial gift. I hoped Al might notice my own illumination, and so it began. The initial donation was almost as easy as the promise. A clinic visit, more paperwork. A small tube passed from hand to locker to hand. A small tube with the world inside it, though to a passerby just off-white gloop. I was with M when his message pinged her. Job done. You're going to be an amazing mum X. She hadn't cried or anything, but we had celebrated lunch out. The message kept pinging in my own mind through lunch and that afternoon. He never used caps lock in messages. He must have sweated over what to say. The kiss at the end. That tiny black cross pinched my nerves somewhat. 35 letters. One kiss. A train departed. I was standing on a platform at the station when I had the first vision, as I came to call them. A scene of loveliness, Emma crouching. A full skirt billowed at her ankles. An expression of broad contentment on her face. Her eyes locked in love and wonder at the toddler staggering towards her open arms. And behind them both, a sanguine figure, one hand on hip, his own face mirroring hers. A perfect image of lost and found. I could feel those vibrations coming long before news came to us, and of course we were the first to know. I had hoped the news would break these mirages that stopped me in my tracks, but in reality, they didn't. The day we heard was the day the match struck. The box, the tiny flame eager to swallow something whole. We had gone round with flowers, the best kind, the massive, overwhelming kind. Even the girls came, and there were tears then too. I did well, in retrospect. I still felt good mostly and wanted to feel her gratitude flow over me again. And it was there, but I noticed it flowed mainly to Alastair. In small touching gestures, and a shared joke about the child growing up to be an accountant like him. I saw her less from then on. Life was, well, life. And she now had so much to do, rest and well-being her main priorities. We messaged, she called once, twice maybe, but I was too knackered to talk. Emma on Instagram, holding a lightbox sign she'd borrowed from my daughter Mama to be. Due date August 10th, 22-inch God. The comments from people though. I couldn't take it. Some close to her knew her secret, most didn't. We'd all decided on that. Something about the growing ladder of over-the-top messages and united happiness caught me by surprise. I was so maddened by it that I felt a migraine coming on and went to bed. Emma. Am I the asshole for telling my mom she'll regret picking her husband over her children? I, 23F, recently moved in with my mom to help her with her bills and take care of my 3 younger siblings. My husband, 22M, and I decided to make the move over the summer because my mom had been dating this man, now her husband, on and off for the last 7 to 8 years. I didn't want her to get back with him because, from what I could see, he wasn't good for her, and their relationship had always been unstable. Not long after we moved in, my mom started talking to him again. Despite telling me that she would never get back with him, she went ahead and married him. Since then, she's developed this mentality that she's now his wife, and that means her responsibilities are with him first and foremost. This has meant that we, her children, see her less and less. She doesn't even live with us full-time anymore. Before she remarried, my mom would be around after work, and we'd spend weekends together. But now, she goes straight to her husband after work and only sees my siblings in the mornings when she takes them to school. She isn't even home on weekends. To say my siblings and I are upset would be an understatement. This past weekend, things came to a head. My siblings, who missed their mom, reached out to her and told her they wanted to spend time with her. She responded by calling them and saying that when she was around, they never appreciated her and just played video games all the time. Now, apparently, they suddenly miss her and want to spend time with her. This made my siblings really sad, and I knew I had to step in. I texted my mom, telling her she couldn't seriously be choosing a man over her kids, especially since the kids love her and need her more than just a few minutes in the morning. I told her that just because they have food and a roof over their heads doesn't mean they don't need their mom. I pointed out that she shouldn't be picking a man who has shown time and again that he doesn't care about her over her children who do. Her response was that when she was with us, we didn't appreciate her and we spent too much time on video games. I tried to reason with her and said she was being unfair to my siblings, who are just kids. She got defensive and said, "Oh, so I'm a bad mom? Okay, that's fine. You'll regret your words one day." Then, she hung up on me and refused to answer my calls and texts. She even told my sister that she wasn't going to talk to me anymore. I felt hurt and frustrated. so I sent her a text saying that she would be the one to regret her actions, not me. I told her that one day she'd realize that putting a man above her children wasn't the way to go, and she'd be sorry for it. I also said that it's a mental issue to be so attached to a man to the point of neglecting your own kids, and that I love her, but I know she's not okay in this situation. Since then, she has refused to talk to me and only contacts my siblings. Now, I'm wondering if I went too far. Was it wrong for me to say those things to my mom, or was I just giving her the reality check she needed? Am I the asshole for refusing to let my mentally ill hoarder in-laws stay at my house indefinitely? I, 37, male, and my wife, 36, both work from home. We've been married for 14 years, and while we've been through a lot together, one thing that has been a constant issue is my in-laws. My in-laws are in their 60s and are hoarders. They're not elderly but have a long history of neglecting themselves, their house, and even their pets. They don't clean, cook, or take care of their hygiene. Their house smells of urine, and their cats urinate and defecate everywhere. Their doctors have even made passive comments about the smell of their home, but they refuse help or to even consider a nursing home. Incident 1. Winter of 2023. Last winter, my father-in-law, FIL, who weighs over 350 pounds, fell at their house. My in-laws couldn't get him up, so they had to call the fire department. The fire department was horrified by the state of their home and called the health department. They gave my in-laws about 14 days to fix some of the issues around the house, including the smell, hygiene, and trash accumulation. The Humane Society came and took their 2 cats away because of the filthy living conditions. They did just enough to pass inspection, but within weeks, everything went back to the way it was. Their house has mold, cat feces, rot, and who knows what else. My FIL has recently recovered from cancer, but his leg infections have been coming back, probably because of the unsanitary environment. I've never been to their home because I can't stomach the thought of it, and my wife has only gone a few times under duress. Incident 2. Today, my FIL fell again, and the fire department had to be called again. His leg infections have gotten so bad that maggots were growing in them. He was delirious from the fall and is now being admitted to the hospital for a kidney injury or something. My MIL is back at the house, but she doesn't have a cell phone, and it seems like she can't get back into the house right now due to the health department marking it as unsafe. My wife is on her way to pick up my MIL and bring her back to our house. However, I said no. I told her, I don't want my MIL staying here indefinitely. I understand that my wife feels the need to help, but I've been very clear about how I feel about the situation. My in-laws had a year to improve their living conditions after the fire department's warning, and they didn't. Now I'm being asked to shelter my MIL, whose behavior has enabled my FIL's hoarding and neglectful lifestyle. We have the room, yes, but my wife suggested that she would sleep in the guest bedroom, which is also my office. That's where I draw the line. I've been clear that I'm not comfortable having her live here, especially after everything we've been through. I feel like my feelings should be respected, too, and that we should come to an agreement as a couple about how we deal with these situations. So, am I the asshole for refusing to let my MIL stay here? My wife seems to think I'm being unreasonable, and everyone else seems to think I'm being harsh. But at this point, I feel like I've done my part by supporting her emotionally through all of this, and I don't want to become the safety net for their choices anymore. Edit for some context. This isn't just about a temporary stay. My wife was already talking about her mom staying here until her dad recovers. No clear timeline on that, and possibly even longer. I'm just not willing to have that become a long-term solution. I've tried to have conversations with my in-laws about their living situation before, but it never changes. My wife believes her mom is a victim of the situation, but I think enabling them is just prolonging the inevitable. I want to be there for my wife, but I also think that this can't just fall on me. I feel like my wife is choosing to avoid the reality of the situation, and it's making me frustrated. Am I the asshole for not attending my boyfriend's college graduation? I, 20F, have been dating my boyfriend, 21M, for over a year and a half. He's graduating college this Friday, but there's a bit of a dilemma. His college is over 1,000 miles away from mine, and I have a final exam the morning of his graduation. I really want to be there for him, but I have 5 finals to prepare for, and I need to do well, especially since I'm double majoring in 2 types of engineering. Here's where the situation gets tricky. My final exam is on Friday from 9 to 10 a.m., and his graduation is at 2 p.m. I looked into flights, but even the quickest ones take around 16 hours of total travel time, and they cost upwards of $700. I simply can't make the trip in time without risking my grades. So I told him I won't be able to attend his graduation. He was really upset when I told him. He said that he understood why I couldn't go, but his tone made it clear that he was disappointed, and he became really aggressive about it. He kept saying things like, "That's just reality," and how people would be asking where I was and thinking less of me. He also mentioned how others are making the effort to be there for him, even though it's not as far as my travel would be. I've repeatedly told him I'm incredibly sorry and that I'll watch the live stream, but he said that doesn't mean anything because I won't physically be there. He also said that he was really looking forward to sharing the graduation traditions with me, and I would miss meeting important people in his life. I asked if he expects me to skip my final, and he said no, but the way he said it made me feel like he was blaming me for not being there. I feel like I've tried to explain myself, but he keeps making me feel guilty and acting like it's entirely my fault that I can't attend. I genuinely care about him and want to make it up to him somehow, but I'm struggling to balance my academic responsibilities with my desire to support him. So, am I the asshole for not attending my boyfriend's graduation? Should I have tried harder to figure out a way to be there? Or is he overreacting by making me feel guilty about it? Am I the asshole for not letting go of the fact that my sister stole my Christmas gift in 2016? Okay, buckle up, because this is a wild ride. So, back in 2016, my mom bought me a Dremel kit for Christmas. Now, I was grateful for the gift, but the truth is, I didn't really need it or have any plans to use it. I had something else in mind for that Christmas, but it wasn't a big deal. My sister, who was a little more interested in the Dremel than I was, offered to take it back for me. She said she had the receipt and would give me the money, so I agreed. Fine, no problem. Christmas Day rolls around, and she takes the Dremel. Then the problem starts. She never tried to contact me about the refund. Weeks go by and nothing happens. So, I reached out to her and asked, "Hey, what's up with the refund?" She told me that she hadn't done it yet, but that she would soon. I thought, okay, no biggie, sometimes people get busy. But as time went on, I started reaching out to her every couple of months or so, checking in. Each time she'd say, "I haven't gotten around to it yet," or give me some other excuse. After a while, her story changed. She said she couldn't return it because it was past the return window. I was a bit annoyed at first, but still didn't think it was a huge deal. Maybe I could just move on, or maybe she could find a solution. So I kept asking her to return the Dremel. But every couple of months, I would get the same responses. First, "I can't return it anymore, the window closed." Then later, "I don't have the receipt anymore." And then the real kicker, she said she lost it. At this point, I was fuming. For almost 2 years, I had been asking her to either return the Dremel or pay me for it. And now she was telling me that she had lost it? I wasn't buying it. I told her, "You need to replace it, or at least reimburse me for it since I've been asking for years. If you lost it, that's your responsibility." But then, things took a turn. She admitted the truth. She confessed that she didn't lose the Dremel at all. She had taken it, given it to a friend, and then lied to me about it for over 2 years. The entire time, she had been gaslighting me, making excuses, and even accusing me of harassment when I wouldn't drop the issue. She said she couldn't believe I wouldn't just get over it. Her exact words were that it had been years now, and I should just move on. I refused to let it go. I told her that her behavior was not only dishonest but deeply hurtful. She had stolen from me, lied to me, and gaslit me for years. She needed to make it right, either by giving me the Dremel or reimbursing me for its value. But she refused. She flat out refused to make things right. Every year or so, we'd end up arguing about it again. Whenever the topic came up, whether it was through friends or just casual conversation, my sister would act as though I was being completely unreasonable. She would tell me how ridiculous I was being for insisting that she owes me. In her mind, it was absurd that I wouldn't just accept her theft. Then, she made an even bigger declaration. She said that if I couldn't get over it, maybe we shouldn't have a relationship. She actually tried to turn the tables on me and act like I was the one who was being unreasonable for wanting her to take responsibility for stealing from me. She would cry victim, saying I was abusing her by holding her accountable, and that maybe she shouldn't have a relationship with me because of it. This is where I just couldn't hold back anymore. I told her, okay, you can cut ties with me if you want, but you're the one who's been an abusive thief. You could just buy me a damn Dremel and make things right, but instead you're trying to play the victim. If you can't do the right thing, then maybe the relationship isn't worth saving. I don't constantly think about this, and I don't hold grudges every day. In fact, we've had a fairly decent relationship as adults. We hang out, talk, and do normal sibling stuff. But around Christmas time, when people bring it up or when she reaches out to me, I always remind her that my position hasn't changed. What she did was wrong, and I'm not going to act like it didn't happen. Even my parents think her behavior is absolutely messed up. They've told her she's wrong, but she always brushes them off or accuses them of taking my side. So, am I the asshole for not letting this go? I've been asking for years for her to make it right, and she refuses. It's not like I'm obsessed with it every day, but I can't just let her get away with stealing from me and acting like she's the one in the right. Am I the asshole for breaking it off with the woman I was seeing because she accused me of trying to kill her dog? First off, apologies in advance for the length. So, I, 29M, have been seeing a woman named Sunny, 28F, for about 5 months. Early on, everything seemed to be going well. I'm not an animal person, but I've always been respectful of other people's pets. I didn't grow up with animals myself because most of my family has allergies or just fears them, so I've never been around them much. I'm just not the type of person who seeks out animals, but I would never harm one, and I make sure I'm polite around them. It's just who I am. Sunny has a dog named Curly, a 2-year-old Labradoodle. She told me she had grown up with dogs but hadn't had one for a while. When she first introduced me to Curly, I didn't expect much, but I also wasn't prepared for how much my allergies would act up. Curly's breed is hypoallergenic, but that didn't seem to matter for me, so I had to adjust my allergy shots to handle being around him. Now the issue started around Thanksgiving. Sunny had to leave town last minute for a business trip and asked me to dog sit for her. She couldn't find anyone else, and she trusted me because, in her words, "You're good with him." I agreed, but I had a condition. I wanted to stay at her place to make sure I wasn't leaving my own stuff exposed, and I figured Curly would be more comfortable in his own space. I didn't explicitly say it, but I didn't want to deal with a hyperactive dog at my own place. Sunny agreed. From the moment I arrived, things were rough. Curly had obviously been upset about Sunny being gone, and when I got there, he had torn up her couch cushions and left a mess. He was barking nonstop, jumping all over me, and generally causing chaos. Sunny suggested that he might be experiencing separation anxiety. I was sympathetic and agreed to work from her place to help ease Curly's anxiety. Over time, I learned his patterns and tried to accommodate him, but it was still difficult. To make matters worse, Sunny missed her Friday flight back, and it wasn't until Saturday that she could return. That reset my plans, and my parents were supposed to fly in that Saturday. I hadn't been to my place since Tuesday, and I still had to clean, grocery shop, and get everything ready for their arrival. Sunny kindly agreed to pick up my parents from the airport so I didn't have to leave Curly for too long. I was grateful for that, though it would be the first time she'd meet my parents. On Saturday morning, I woke up early to take Curly for his walk and found him panting, whimpering, and surrounded by vomit. I panicked and tried calling Sunny, but she didn't pick up. I then called the emergency vet she'd provided. They asked if he had eaten anything unusual, and that's when I realized Curly had gotten into some bags on the table and eaten a bunch of dried fruit, which I later learned contained raisins, something that's toxic to dogs. I rushed him to the vet, genuinely scared for his well-being. I kept trying to call Sunny, but when she finally picked up, she was livid. She immediately accused me of poisoning Curly on purpose. She yelled at me, saying that I did it because I didn't want her to have a dog, and this was my way of getting rid of him. She even used the word prosecuted. No matter how much I apologized and tried to explain it was an accident, she kept screaming at me. She said I was a terrible person and that I shouldn't be allowed near any animals. It was honestly terrifying. Later, when I returned to her place after the vet visit, her cousin was there waiting for me. She had been texting her cousin during the whole situation, and now her cousin told me to leave. As I was packing my things, I was berated about how I should have known better and how I must be a monster if I didn't know what could harm a dog. I didn't argue with her because at that point, I was just done. I texted Sunny, explaining everything that had happened, including the vet's advice. I also told her that it was over between us. I blocked her and deleted her information. Fast forward to yesterday. Sunny showed up at my house, parked in my driveway, and asked to talk. She apologized, saying she had been really scared and reacted out of fear for her dog. She said she didn't think I was a bad person and was genuinely sorry for everything she said. She admitted it was a big overreaction. She also said she was sorry for breaking up with me so suddenly and that she thought we could still have a conversation and see if things could be fixed. She seemed sincere, but I just couldn't get over what had happened. Some of my friends think I should give her another chance. They pointed out that I tend to fall back too easily and then drop things quickly, and they said I should give her some grace because people can act irrationally when scared. They said that people who love their pets can be more sensitive and that I should give her the benefit of the doubt. They even mentioned that I haven't connected with someone like this in years, and I should at least see where it could go. But to be honest, I just feel like a line was crossed. She accused me of trying to harm her dog and used language that made me feel like I could never be trusted again. The whole thing felt like a massive overreaction, and it honestly scared me. I don't know if I can look past that. So, am I the asshole for not giving her another chance? Edit. Thanks for all the comments. Some of you have pointed out how hard it is to get over something like this, and I really appreciate the perspective. After reading everything, I'm feeling more confident in my decision. I just don't think I can go back after how badly things escalated. I know she was scared, but her reaction was completely disproportionate. Am I the asshole for telling my sister I can only spend so much on our siblings? I, 25F, have been financially supporting my mom and younger half-siblings, 13F and 14M, for years. My mom works a seasonal job, and due to her partner not helping financially, my sister, 28F, and I have always taken on the responsibility of buying Christmas gifts for the kids. Over the last 10 years, this has become a tradition. Last year alone, I spent $500 to $600 on just my younger siblings, on top of gifts for other people in my life. This has become a big financial strain for me, especially since I live independently and also carry student loan debt. I live about an hour away from my older sister, and though I'm close with my siblings, I am considered the isolated one. I've always been somewhat of a loner, especially with my mental health struggles. I have severe trauma and anxiety related to my family, which makes visiting difficult for me. Despite this, I've continued to help out with the kids and try to stay involved. I also work 2 jobs, which leaves me with limited time and energy to visit or participate in family events. It's a tough balance to strike, but I do it because I care. However, my family doesn't always understand or respect my need for space, and that has caused tension over the years. This year, my older sister reached out to me to ask if I wanted to contribute to the Christmas gifts for the younger siblings. She and my mom had already done most of the shopping, but they wanted me to help with the remaining gifts. I explained that, due to my tight budget, I could only contribute $100. I've been prioritizing paying off my student loan debt, which has been a significant burden for me, and I've been trying to live more frugally to get a handle on my finances. However, my sister's response took me by surprise. She was passive-aggressive and said, "You better not be buying your boyfriend something over $100 then." I was really taken aback by this. I thought it was unfair and rude of her to assume that I would prioritize spending on my boyfriend instead of my siblings. It felt like she was trying to guilt-trip me into spending more, and it made me defensive. I explained to her that I'm just sticking to a budget and that the concert tickets I buy earlier in the year are not an indication that I'm financially irresponsible, but just part of how I manage my leisure activities on a budget. The conversation quickly escalated when she accused me of not prioritizing family. She insisted that family should always come before friends or boyfriends, and that it would be silly of me not to prioritize them. This guilt trip was particularly frustrating because I'm already financially stretched thin, and it felt like she was minimizing my own struggles. I told her I was not coming down for Christmas this year, which was something I had been considering for a while but hadn't had the courage to say. I felt pushed to the breaking point, and in the heat of the moment, I also told my mom that I would be sending my contribution directly to the kids but wouldn't be part of the family gathering. Looking back, I'm questioning whether I handled the situation in the best way. I feel like my decision to withdraw was impulsive and driven by the frustration I felt in that moment. I've been wanting to take a step back from the family dynamic for years but never had the courage to voice it, and this argument kind of pushed me into a corner. I was just trying to set a boundary, but I'm not sure if I could have communicated it in a better way. Could I have found a different way to say no? Or should I have just stuck to my guns? So, am I the asshole for telling my sister that I can only spend so much on Christmas gifts and opting out of the family gathering this year? Could I have handled the situation differently? Am I the asshole for not mailing a previous tenant's old letters? I recently moved into a new apartment that had been vacant for over 6 months. When I checked the mailbox, I found several letters addressed to the previous tenant. Some of them looked important, maybe even checks, so I reached out to my landlord who put me in touch with the previous tenant via email. I offered to meet her at the apartment to give her the letters, but she explained that she no longer lived in the area. She mentioned that she would be in town for work for a few days and asked if I could meet her at her office in Midtown Manhattan. For context, the apartment is in Brooklyn, which is about an hour away from Midtown. I told her I don't work in Manhattan, but offered to have my wife meet her at her office in downtown Manhattan, which is about 15 minutes from Midtown. We suggested some time slots, but she wasn't available at those times. Then, I offered to leave the letters in the building lobby for her to pick up at her convenience. She agreed and we arranged for her to come the next morning. However, when the morning came, she called and said that her plans had changed, and she was no longer able to come to pick them up. Instead, she asked if I could mail the letters to her. Here's where I get stuck. I don't have a car, and the nearest post office is about a 15-minute walk away. It's not a huge distance, but I wasn't thrilled about spending 45 to 60 minutes running this errand, especially since I had already gone out of my way several times to help her get the letters. I suggested that she ask a friend or one of her old roommates, who was coming to the apartment later that week, to pick them up and mail them for her. She said she would ask, but sounded offended that I wasn't willing to mail them myself. I feel like I've already done quite a lot. I reached out, held onto the letters in my small apartment, and offered multiple solutions for her to retrieve them. But I didn't feel that going to the post office was justified when she hadn't really made much of an effort to pick them up herself. So, am I the asshole for not mailing the letters to her? Maybe I should have just done it, but I'm honestly not sure if I'm being too critical or if my frustration is valid. Am I the asshole for telling off a creepy classmate? Okay, here goes. I, 17F, have been dealing with a creepy classmate, 17M, for all 4 years of high school now. He's autistic, so for a long time, I put up with it because I felt guilty thinking, he doesn't know what he's doing. But over the years, it's just gotten worse and worse. The first year of harassment and stalking was really unsettling. He would make gross comments about my body, pointing out how big my chest was, how thin I was, and things like that. I was really uncomfortable. After that first year, it kind of stopped, but he still followed me around and tried to be my friend in this really awkward, forced way. I just hoped it would eventually stop. Well, it didn't. Each year, he would continue to follow me, sit near me, and just generally make me feel uncomfortable. One time at homecoming, he actually followed me to the bathroom. I had to be escorted out by a huge group of girls, none of whom I even knew, because he wouldn't leave. Felt like he was stalking me at that point, and it honestly scared me. Finally, this year, I started sitting with a big group of my friends at lunch. Guess who tracked me down? Yep, the creepy guy. He followed me to our table, sat down like it was completely normal, and started talking to everyone like he knew them for years. He was really off-putting and just way too comfortable. My friends knew the backstory, so they were creeped out too. They also noticed that I was uncomfortable, and I could see it was affecting them. After that, I decided I had to do something about it. I finally went to a principal and talked about what was going on. The principal talked to him and told him to stop. But surprise, surprise, it didn't work. A few days later, he approached me like nothing happened and sat down again, acting like it was fine. That's when one of my friends, who had had enough, told him off. She told him he was creeping everyone out, and we needed him to leave us alone. Now, He's accusing my friend of being a liar and saying that I'm a horrible person for treating him unfairly. He's upset because I wouldn't just put up with his behavior, and I'm confused. I honestly don't get what I did wrong. Did I do something wrong? Am I the asshole for finally telling him off after years of trying to be patient and avoid conflict? *##### edit. Thanks for the feedback, everyone. Just to clarify, I've tried being direct with him and telling him to stop. I've also had other friends try to tell him to stop, but nothing changed. I'm someone who struggles with confrontation, and I can't handle it without getting really anxious. I often shake or cry, so I rely on my friends to speak up when I can't. I've tried to report it to teachers, but the excuse I keep hearing is that he's autistic and can't help it. The only teacher who helped was one principal, but after she talked to him, things just went back to normal. My friends and I are now working on reporting him again, and I plan to talk to my mom when I get home to see if she can help me take further action. Thanks for all the support. Am I the asshole for not wanting to go? I, 35F, haven't talked to my best friend from high school, 35F, in over 5 years. We had been close during high school, but since then we've both lived completely separate lives. We have families now, and although we interact on social media occasionally, we don't talk or meet in person. Recently, she reached out to reconnect, but I've been hesitant. I've made the decision to close that chapter of my life because of some unresolved pain from high school. She was the popular girl, and I was the one who often felt left out or not good enough. There were moments when she'd say one thing to my face, but behind my back, she and her friends would talk about me like I didn't matter. I get it, we were kids, but it still stings. I've moved on and am happy with my life and my current friendships, so I don't really see the need to rekindle anything. The other day, I received a message from her husband, Mark, who I haven't spoken to in years. He said he wanted to buy me a plane ticket to visit Ash, my old friend, for Christmas as a surprise. He was very generous, but honestly, I felt a bit weird about it. He kept insisting and even said he'd cover the cost, but I don't feel comfortable just hopping on a plane after so many years of barely talking. Plus, my family has its own plans for the holidays, and I can't just drop everything for a weekend. I feel anxious about the whole thing and didn't know how to respond, so I told him I'd get back to him, but now I'm just feeling uncomfortable. I don't want to sound ungrateful, but part of me feels like he's treating me like an object to be bought with a plane ticket to make his wife happy. Am I the asshole for not wanting to go? Should I feel honored by the offer? Am I the asshole for not getting my mom the gift she wanted? So, I graduated college a few months ago, but my graduation ceremony isn't until a month from now. For context, in our family, it's a tradition that the graduation gift is always gold, and my mom had been talking for months about getting me a gift to mark the occasion. Here's where it starts getting tricky. About halfway through those 6 months, my mom gave me a jewelry set while we were cleaning out her closet. She said, "Consider this your graduation gift from me." It was a nice gesture and it was a pretty set, but honestly, I didn't feel like it was a personal gift. It felt like something she had lying around. Still, I didn't make a fuss about it. She had promised that my dad and her would buy me something more substantial later. Flash forward to her birthday 3 weeks ago. I ask her what she wants, and she immediately says she wants the same necklace my aunt had gifted me for my graduation. I was a bit taken aback because, well, she had never mentioned it before and I thought she'd have a different idea in mind. But whatever, I agreed to find it for her. I'm the eldest daughter and, like many families, I'm the one who ends up organizing things, especially since my parents are both not exactly the most gift-giving types. Then, just a week before her birthday, my dad announces we'll be going away for a few days to an Airbnb cabin. The trip was planned around her birthday, and we would be leaving the day before. So now I'm in a time crunch to find this necklace she wanted, and I realize I'm running out of time. I rushed to a couple of stores, but none had the exact necklace she asked for. The one store I knew had it, where I originally bought my necklace, wasn't one I could get to in time. So, I ended up going to a different store where I could at least get something that looked nice. I picked out the best thing they had, which was a small diamond necklace. Not gold, but it was still something decent. Here's the thing, my dad paid for it. I'm an unpaid intern and can't afford gifts like that on my own. And my Mom always tells me not to worry about the price anyway. So, technically, it was a family gift, not just from me. When I gave it to her, I could tell she wasn't thrilled. It was smaller than she wanted, and I could see her disappointment. She asked, "What happened to the necklace I wanted?" And, in the moment, I lied and said it was sold out. I don't know why I did it. Maybe because I was embarrassed, or maybe because I didn't want to deal with the fallout of not getting exactly what she asked for. 3 weeks later, I'm floored when she gives the necklace I bought her back to me, saying, "Consider this your graduation gift from your dad." I was confused. She goes on to explain that she had actually bought the necklace she wanted herself and that it was what my dad had picked out for me instead. She just framed it like it was part of the whole family gift. Now I'm feeling guilty because she obviously didn't love the necklace I bought her, and I still feel bad about lying about the one she really wanted. But the thing is, I didn't have time to get it for her, and even when I did try, the one I got her was the best I could do under the circumstances. Am I the asshole for not getting her the gift she wanted, for lying about it, and for not really having any say in how the gift situation unfolded? I just wanted to get her something nice, and now it feels like everything backfired. Am I the asshole for telling my daughter's father that I will not be doing a quinceañera for her? So here's my situation. I, 35F, have a 13-year-old daughter who wants a quinceañera. For those who don't know, it's a huge, traditional celebration when a girl turns 15 in the Hispanic culture. It's typically a big, expensive event with fancy dresses, food, music, and a lot of guests. I'm not against the tradition itself, but I just don't feel comfortable spending that much money on one event. I'm a US-born Hispanic woman, but I'm not exactly steeped in traditional Mexican culture. I've lived in the US most of my life, and my kids are Americanized. They are familiar with the culture, but they're not raised with the kind of traditional Hispanic celebrations that many families have. Here's where the tension starts. My daughter's father, 36M, lives with his mom, doesn't pay child support because of his own financial issues. He owes the IRS and has credit card debt, and doesn't contribute financially to anything for our daughter. I'm the one who pays for everything, her school activities, sports, clothes, trips, you name it. I don't ask him for anything because he's already paying child support for another child he has with his ex, and I don't want to burden him further. I'm in a good place financially. My fiancé and I make a decent income, we're debt-free, and I've worked hard to stay that way. I have a full-time job, side contract work, and I'm a part-time graduate student. I'm managing everything without relying on my ex, and while it's tough, I'm doing it. So when my ex approached me about the quinceañera, he told me that our daughter wants one and that she wants a big party with all the family in one place. I told him right off the bat that I'm not doing a full quinceañera. I offered to throw a simple party in our backyard instead, and I invited him to come. We have a nice house and a spacious backyard, so it would be a fun and affordable way to celebrate her. Then the conversation took a turn. My ex told me that his cousin had a baby shower at a ranch-style venue that cost $3,000 for 250 people. He's now pushing for a similar setup for our daughter's quinceañera. He says his family is huge, at least 100 people, and that it's not fair for our daughter to have a small party when everyone else gets a big one. I freaked out. I don't have the time or energy to plan such a big event, especially since I'm already juggling work, school, and taking care of everything else for our daughter. I told him no, that it wasn't going to be a quinceañera but a simpler party with food, a DJ, and no more than 100 people. He then told me I was really disappointing him, which hit me hard. I explained that I simply couldn't afford it, that quinceañeras are ridiculously expensive, dress, dolls, waltz, damas, band, and all that, and that I couldn't handle the stress of planning a huge event on top of everything else I'm doing. To make matters worse, he gave me $200 recently and said he would give me $100 every pay period going forward. But, to be honest, this is the first time he's given me that much money for our daughter since we separated when she was 1. The money feels like a band-aid, and it doesn't change the fact that he's not been involved in any meaningful way for most of her life. I'm already stressed because I'm facing finals this week, and the stress of dealing with him is keeping me up at night. It feels like I'm constantly walking on eggshells, and no matter what I do, I'm made to feel like I'm in the wrong. Talking to him is pointless because all it does is cause me more anxiety. Now, I'm considering giving him back the money and telling him we should each just do what we can for our daughter separately. I just don't know if that will make things worse, and I'm trying to keep things as civil as possible for the sake of our daughter. Update. I just want to clarify that I was always planning to throw my daughter a party. I wasn't going to go all out with a quinceañera, but I had planned for something nice in our backyard. I told her dad that he's more than welcome to come, but I wasn't going to be spending thousands of dollars on an extravagant event. I just want to be realistic and make sure we do something manageable and meaningful, not something that will put unnecessary stress on me. Or our finances. Am I the asshole for not letting my kids visit their grandparents? Hello, everyone. I've been in a tough spot for a while and I'm looking for some perspective. I posted a couple of months ago about my ex's wife staging a religious intervention when my son, Ben, decided he wanted to embrace Judaism and be bar mitzvahed. For context, we share 3 kids: Amy, 18, Tom, 16, and Ben, 15. Some of you helped me realize I was underreacting, so I consulted a lawyer, and I now have full decision-making for my kids' religious upbringing and full custody. My ex has visitation every other weekend, but I've been flexible about letting him have the kids whenever he wants. However, I made one rule. My ex's wife, the stepmother, is never around them. My kids are very close with their paternal grandparents, and they know the stepmother isn't allowed to be present. Twice, when I picked the kids up from their grandparents, the stepmother was there. The excuse was that she had just popped in briefly to drop off the baby, but I made it clear that if she was there, I'd plan a different day for them to visit. They insisted it was just a last-minute visit, and I let it go. Now, they want the kids to visit for 5 days over Christmas break, not on the 24th or 25th, and I'm not comfortable with the stepmother being around. Ben still gets very anxious around her, and he's in therapy for it. The problem is that my in-laws refuse to tell her she can't come over. They claim they don't want to get in the middle, and that it's making them choose between their grandkids and their daughter-in-law. I reached out to my ex about it, and he brushed me off. He said since the stepmother wouldn't be around for long, he wasn't stopping it. He also claimed there's nothing in the custody order that says she can't be present, and that as his wife and the mother of their child, she shouldn't have to tiptoe around. I was so frustrated that I lost it. I told him I'd be going back to court for supervised visits and a restraining order against her if she kept showing up around the kids. He hung up on me. I then asked the kids what they wanted. Amy said their grandparents. Told them not to say anything to avoid upsetting me. Ben was clearly relieved, and it broke my heart. Tom said he'd stay with Ben. I called my ex-mother-in-law and told her the kids wouldn't be coming for the visit unless they chose to stop letting the stepmother around. I also said they were welcome to visit the kids at our house, but I wouldn't be letting the kids go to theirs unless she was kept away. I told them it was wrong to ask the kids to keep secrets. They called my ex, who berated me for punishing his parents. The stepmother then sent me a text saying I was being unfair. Now, my ex and his family are all upset with me, and I'm starting to wonder if I'm being unreasonable. Everyone seems to think I'm the asshole for keeping the kids from seeing their grandparents. So, am I wrong for not letting my kids visit their grandparents when the stepmother will be there? Edit asterisk to clarify, I have no issue with the kids seeing their grandparents. My issue is with the stepmother being present when it's clear that Ben, especially, is still struggling with her presence. It's not just about religious differences. It's also about the emotional impact it's having on him. The secrecy and pressure to choose between his grandparents and his own well-being is what I can't accept. I've been patient and understanding in the past, but I can't keep ignoring how Ben feels. My stepsister ran off with my fiancé a week before the wedding, after sending me postcards for months. But karma has a funny way of working things out. I was 28 years old and engaged to my college boyfriend. We'd been together since we were 18, all through university, and got engaged when I was 23. We had been engaged for a year, and everything seemed perfect until a week before our wedding. That's when my fiancé, Greg, and my stepsister, Melissa, ran off together. They left only a letter for me. In the letter, Greg explained that he had started an affair with Melissa a couple of months after we got engaged. He said he realized he couldn't marry me because it would be unfair to both of us, and to Melissa, since they were the ones truly in love. He believed the universe had used me to guide him to his real love, and he couldn't deceive everyone any longer with the illusion of a happy future. That was it. They left, and I didn't see them again until recently. Greg's parents covered the entire wedding cost and didn't want me to pay a dime. They were embarrassed by what their son had done. After that, I had no contact with them, and we didn't have anything else to talk about. But my own family was furious. My father was so upset that he considered hiring a private investigator to track them down and bring them back to get answers. For context, my dad isn't my biological father, but I've always treated him as my real dad since he's been in my life since I was very young. My biological father left shortly after I was born, and my mom never saw him again. They had never been married. My mom remarried when I was 8 to my dad, who has always been there for me. Melissa and I used to attend the same school, which is how our parents met. But for some reason, Melissa decided she didn't like me and began bullying me for years. She was a true tormentor, and her friends joined in on making my life miserable. It wasn't just at school. She even kept it up when we were at home, always looking for ways to make me feel bad. I complained to my parents several times and they tried to intervene, but it was never enough. She didn't fear any punishment, not even from our parents. My school years were a nightmare because of her. At that time, my mom wasn't around much, and Melissa's mother had passed away when Melissa was young, so she didn't have much parental guidance. Whenever my mom tried to discipline her, Melissa would tell her that she wasn't her real mother and had no right to scold her. My dad tried his best to stop her bullying, but nothing worked. They tried everything from scolding to speaking kindly to her, but she refused to stop. Sometimes they even threatened to send her away, but she would dare them to do it, knowing their threats were empty. By high school, things only got worse. Melissa had adopted a lot of bad habits and was practically a delinquent. She started smoking, skipping school, and drinking with her equally troublesome friends. It wasn't until she was arrested one night, along with her friends, for breaking into someone's house while drunk, that our parents finally decided to send her away and get her the help she clearly needed. After weeks of protests and begging, my parents succeeded in getting her into a rehabilitation center for troubled teens. She wasn't happy about it, but my dad was firm, telling her that if she wanted to live with us and be part of the family, she would have to change. He couldn't allow her behavior to continue, especially when she was becoming a danger to society. She was angry and left for several years, not returning until after we had graduated. During that time, she lived with her aunt and attended a school near the rehab center. I didn't see her during those years, as I wasn't interested in how my biggest bully was doing. My parents visited her every weekend, asking me if I wanted to join them, but I always said no. Once she was gone, my high school years got so much better since I no longer had someone bullying me. Melissa continued her education at the rehab center and later came back. The first thing she did was apologize for everything she had put me through. She seemed a little calmer, and I actually thought she had changed for the better. So I forgave her. We were about to leave for college in a few months anyway, so it didn't matter. Once we started college, I moved away and so did she. We only came back for holidays, and she was much kinder to me after that. By kinder, I don't mean she actually treated me well, but rather that she ignored me instead of bothering me every chance she got, like she used to. Honestly, it was a welcome change because I preferred being ignored than being bullied. Our parents noticed the shift but didn't try to force us to get along or act like sisters. Given our history, that was more than enough for them. Then I started dating Greg, and after we had been together for a year, I decided to bring him home for Thanksgiving to introduce him to my parents. Everyone got along really well, and for the first time, I noticed that even Melissa seemed interested in the conversation. This was a rare occurrence since she came back from rehab. She and Greg really hit it off, and after I started dating him, she began showing more interest in being my friend. She would often come up to me just to chat, which she'd never done before. I didn't understand what was going on, and I had a small suspicion that maybe she liked Greg. So one day, I decided to ask her directly if the real reason she was trying to be my friend was because of Greg or something like that, because I was paranoid. She laughed and told me that wasn't the case. But Greg had mentioned how good his relationship was with his siblings during our first dinner together, while talking about his family. That had made her reconsider how she had been treating me since coming back. And now she was trying to make things right and improve our relationship. It had nothing to do directly with Greg, but he had definitely played a role as a catalyst that made her reflect on our relationship. She told me she had blamed me for her being sent away for so long, but eventually, she accepted that it wasn't my fault. She had brought it upon herself with her terrible behavior. So, it was time to stop punishing me for it and start trying to truly be part of the family. She said this wouldn't be possible until she apologized sincerely and actively worked on our relationship. I'm an emotional fool, and what she told me that day moved me. So, like an idiot, I decided to forgive her and be friends with her. I guess that's what hurt the most because she betrayed me. After we became friends, things went well for a while, and she was actively involved in the wedding preparations. I wouldn't say we were best friends, but we were no longer as bad as we used to be. We worked on rebuilding our relationship, meeting at least once or twice a month, and talking to each other. By the time I got engaged, we were in a good place. Whenever we saw each other at family events, things went pretty normally, so I never suspected anything. Even after the engagement, they continued acting like nothing was wrong. Not for a second did I think that maybe Greg had something with Melissa. It just never crossed my mind because Greg put on a very convincing act of being in love with me the whole time, while secretly deceiving me with Melissa. And she, too, was very convincing at pretending to be my friend. So, I didn't discover the truth until it was too late, and they were already gone. My parents wanted to track them down and bring them back to face the consequences, but I convinced them to let it go because I just wanted to forget everything. It was already enough that both of them had turned me into a complete fool and left a week before I was supposed to get married. I didn't want more drama. I was really depressed, and I simply didn't have the energy. I spent the following week doing nothing but working and sleeping, trying to avoid facing my feelings. My heart was obviously broken, and I was numb, but the worst was yet to come. A couple of weeks after my supposed wedding day, I received a postcard from Melissa, sent from California. But that wasn't all. She had included a bunch of photos of her with Greg, and they looked really happy together. It was so obvious that she was rubbing it in my face because she even mentioned apologizing for the surprise before my wedding. But of course, she didn't feel sorry at all. It was just meant to make me angry. That's when I realized she had never truly forgiven me for what happened all those years ago, and she still blamed me for getting her sent away. She had never really wanted to be my friend. She had just used me to get to Greg. I trusted her and let her use me. It was a really twisted plan, I have to admit. For days after receiving that postcard, I couldn't even sleep. I was losing my mind over it. It was such a traumatic experience for me, and I had to go to therapy for months to undo all the damage and deal with my trust issues. The postcard wasn't even an isolated incident. She kept sending postcards of her and Greg for months after that, but it ended after about a year because I didn't respond or engage in the drama. Our parents were really upset about it, and naturally, they cut all ties with her after that. They didn't even try to contact her after the first postcard, and that became a huge problem for Melissa. She had been ready to inherit her father's business. She was a business student, and that was part of the reason she chose that path for herself, because she wanted to work with her father. However, after everything that happened, our father severed all ties with her and told me I could join him instead, because he felt he needed to make it up to me. But I didn't have a business degree. I was a history student, which didn't really align with business. So I had to learn the basics first. My father said it wasn't a problem because he was willing to teach me everything he knew so that I could eventually take over the business instead of Melissa. I agreed and started working under his guidance, learning how to run the business so he could retire and hand me the reins. After a while, I worked really hard, and last year I was finally promoted. My father retired, and it was an incredible feeling because I had started from scratch and had to learn everything. But now everything was running smoothly under my leadership. It had been going well for some time, and thanks to me, my parents could now spend more time together without worrying about the business because I took care of it. It's been this way for quite some time, and I practically stopped thinking about Greg after I started working for my father because that took up all my time, along with the therapy that helped me move on. I would say that now I've completely overcome the past and no longer think about them or what they did. I never thought they would reach out to me again, much less ask for my help, because that would take a lot of nerve and a complete lack of functioning brain cells. Asking me for help after everything they did, after they deceived me and made a fool of me, was beyond me. They truly lacked common sense for even contacting me. A few days ago, I was at home since it was the weekend, and around lunchtime, I heard someone frantically ringing my doorbell. I thought it was the pizza I had ordered, so I didn't pay much attention. But when I opened the door, I got the biggest surprise of my life. Instead of a delivery person, it was Melissa standing outside my house, looking really worried. I didn't know what to say, so I just waited in silence for her to speak. As I looked at her, I realized she was definitely here to ask for help because she looked terrible. Her appearance gave it all away. Even as a child, Melissa had always dressed well. But now, she was wearing old, faded clothes that clearly hadn't been bought recently. Her jeans were too short, and she looked like she hadn't been eating. I had already made up my mind that whatever she was about to ask, the answer would be no. She said she needed my help because she and Greg had been fighting for a while since he lost his job a couple of months ago. Instead of looking for a new job, he had started drinking, and although she had been trying to find work for herself, she couldn't because she had given up her career to stay at home and do all the housework when she first moved in with Greg. Because of this, she hadn't been working lately, and the gap in her resume made her a poor candidate for the jobs she'd been applying for. She said she'd heard from some relatives that our father had retired and handed me control of the business, so now she was here to ask me if I would be willing to hire Greg and give him something to do. Melissa told me she had come all the way here just to ask for my help, and she apologized for what she had done in the past. She said she was counting on me to get her out of this mess. She admitted she hadn't even approached our parents yet, and had come directly to my house to ask for help because she knew I had a kind heart. She felt terribly guilty for betraying me in the past, but she was sure I wouldn't refuse her now that she needed me. Her sense of entitlement was so ridiculous that I ended up laughing in her face and told her to look elsewhere because I don't hire cheaters. I then slammed the door in her face and went back into the living room, ready to call the police if she didn't leave my property soon. Fortunately, she left that day, but she hasn't left me alone since. After her visit, the first thing I did was call our parents and tell them what had happened. They told me they'd heard from a couple of neighbors that Melissa had returned to the city with Greg, but they hadn't believed it. We live in a relatively small town, so everyone knows everyone. We quickly discovered that Melissa had been here for about a week before she finally came to visit me. She had been living with one of her high school friends, probably the friend who told her where I lived and also about the fact that I had inherited the business, which rightfully should have been hers. Now, she was really trying to take advantage of that. A couple of days after her visit, she decided to go see our parents to tell them how ruthless I was being. She had hoped they would be on her side, now that she had the upper hand in terms of who was suffering more, but she couldn't have been more wrong. My father told her that the business was mine to run now, and that she no longer had a say in the matter because he wouldn't be overseeing me. My mother reminded her that she was the one who had betrayed me by running off with my fiancé after pretending to be my friend for years, and that she completely deserved what was happening to her now. She had lost the right to ask any of us for help, especially me, after tormenting me with those postcards. Melissa tried to defend herself, saying that all that was in the past and that she was a different person now. But my parents told her to leave because they didn't want anything to do with her. This led to her throwing a tantrum at their house, claiming they had always favored me over her and treated me like the golden child. She told my father that, despite being his own flesh and blood, he had never treated her the way he treated me, and acted as if I were his daughter while she was worth nothing to him. When he reminded her that he had made more concessions for her behavior in the past than any other parent in the world would have, she said it didn't matter. I had everything that was supposed to be hers, including the business I was boasting about. She even claimed that it wasn't her fault that Greg had fallen in love with her and wanted to spend his life with her instead of with me. But for some reason, she was the one being punished for it. She insisted that the postcards she sent were a genuine apology and that she wasn't trying to torment me. Honestly, I haven't been able to stop thinking about this since my father told me what she said. In a way, it's true that she was supposed to inherit the business and be in my place, but she really lost it due to her own actions. I had nothing to do with that. I never told my father to exclude her from his life and give the business to me. He did it on his own, and it feels somewhat unfair that she's blaming me for it. Also, what she said about me being the golden child is absolutely false, but I can understand why she would feel that way. In her mind, she was the one sent away, and for a father to decide to send their child away is a big deal. I know it was hard for my father, but again, it's neither his fault nor mine. If he hadn't taken the necessary steps, Melissa could have ended up a criminal or something because that was the path she was heading down. On top of that, I really don't think she was trying to apologize with those postcards. She was probably just trying to cover up her actions by calling it a genuine apology. I do feel bad for her because her husband turned out to be completely useless, although I dodged a bullet there. In fact, he came to me, and I can't imagine how hard that must have been for her. So, in a way, I feel sorry for how I treated her. Now, I have everything, and she has nothing, so I can't help but feel pity for her. That's just who I am as a person. Besides, so much time has passed, and I don't feel like I should hold on to that grudge anymore. But at the same time, I don't want to help her in any way. The most I can do is offer my sympathy, but I really don't want to hire her or help with money. I think it's enough that I even feel bad for her after everything she put me through. Most people probably wouldn't even blink an eye. The only reason I feel sorry for her right now is because this business really should have been hers, and now that I'm in a position of power, I feel like I'm finally getting my revenge on her. But at the same time, it doesn't feel right. Maybe it's because of what she said about me being the golden child, or maybe it's just imposter syndrome, but I feel weird about this. Am I the idiot for refusing to hire my ex-fiancé, who ran off with my stepsister, now that they're struggling financially and asking for my help? Am I the asshole for calling the police about the deranged sounds coming from my neighbor's apartment? I'm a woman in my 50s and I live in a small building where my neighbor, John, a man in his 20s, and I have always had a fairly neutral, neighborly relationship. We text occasionally about building issues or sign for each other's packages. Nothing beyond that. We weren't friends, but we got along just fine. One afternoon over the summer, I was taking a nap when I was suddenly awakened by an incredibly disturbing sound. It was a high-pitched, keening wail that sounded like it could be either an animal or a human in extreme distress. It was so unsettling that it made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. I went out into the hall, and a few other neighbors were already gathered, equally confused and alarmed by the sound. We quickly determined that the noise was coming from John's apartment, but we couldn't figure out what was causing it. John didn't have a pet, which made the whole situation even stranger. The sounds continued for at least 90 minutes, and it sounded like either an injured or dying animal, or worse, a person in distress. I texted and called John multiple times, leaving messages about the sounds and expressing my concern, but I got no response. By this point, the other neighbors were also freaked out and suggested we should call the police to make sure no one, or no animal, was in danger in his apartment. I texted John one last time to let him know I was about to call 911. I didn't know what else to do. I called the police, explained the situation, and they could even hear the sounds in the background. Shortly after, John called me back, sounding very angry. He yelled, "You called the police? What were you thinking? I'll take care of it." About 20 minutes later, a man arrived at the building and opened the door to John's apartment. As soon as the door opened, the sound stopped, and an adorable bulldog came running out, wagging its tail. The man, who I assume was renting the apartment from John through some Airbnb-type arrangement, got on the phone and started arguing with John. I overheard him saying things like, "Well, you didn't say anything about pets." Apparently, John hadn't mentioned the dog, which is why we were all so confused by the distressing noises. I immediately called 911 back to let them know everything had been resolved, and the operator said everything was fine and no police would be coming. After that, I assumed everything was over, but then, about an hour later, John showed up at my door, furious. He was pounding on it, yelling about me calling the police. I explained again that it wasn't just me who was concerned. Several neighbors had gathered, and we were all worried about the strange sounds coming from his apartment. Since then, John has completely ignored me. He doesn't reply to any of my messages, and he doesn't even acknowledge me when I see him in the hall. It feels like he now views me as some kind of troublemaker, and I can't help but feel guilty. I'm also worried that he might think I acted insensitively as a white person calling the police on him, a black man, when that can have tragic consequences in this country. I am black as well, but at the time, my only concern was the strange, painful-sounding noise coming from his apartment. The situation scared me, and I felt that calling the police was the right thing to do. But now I'm wondering if I overreacted and whether I handled it in the wrong way. So, am I the asshole for calling the police about the disturbing sounds coming from my neighbor's apartment? Am I the asshole for needing a me day after vacationing at the in-laws for a week? I've recently been called an asshole for needing some time to myself, and I'm honestly questioning if I'm in the wrong. So, here's the situation. I went on a week-long vacation with my husband to visit his family. This is not a vacation for me by any stretch of the imagination. His family is, to put it bluntly, not my biggest fans. They come from old money, live in a fancy house, and have a way of looking down on people like me, people from humble beginnings. I know they don't think I'm good enough for their son. I get it, I accept it, and I don't let it bother me too much. But here's the thing, it's emotionally exhausting. I'm the type of person who tries to make the best of any situation. I want to support my husband, and I want to make sure that, at least when I'm around his family, I'm being positive, adaptable, and doing what I can to keep the peace. I bite my tongue when they make condescending comments about where I come from, and I put on a smile even though I'm dying inside. My husband's relationship with his family is really important to him, so I don't want to cause any issues by confronting them. But that doesn't mean I don't feel the strain of it all. Vacationing at his family's house feels like a long series of emotional punches. Every dinner, every conversation, every comment just takes something out of me. And by the end of the week, I'm absolutely drained. After we got back home, I asked my husband if I could have a me day. I wanted a day to myself to just recharge. No work, no responsibilities, no social obligations. Just me at home, doing whatever I wanted. I didn't think it was a big ask. Honestly, I thought I had earned it after the emotional labor of spending a week with his family. But my husband didn't see it that way. He got really upset and called me an asshole for wanting to take the day off. He said that I was being lazy and that there were so many things to do around the house, especially with the holidays coming up. He felt like I was just avoiding responsibilities, and that made me feel even worse. I tried to explain to him that I wasn't being lazy. I was just emotionally exhausted and needed to decompress. But it didn't seem to get through to him. He thinks I'm being selfish and that I should just power through like everyone else does. I get that we're getting closer to the holidays, and there's a lot to do, but I really don't think it's too much to ask for a single day to reset my mind and emotions. Am I the asshole for needing a break after spending a week with his family? Should I just suck it up and keep pushing through? Or is it fair to ask for this me day? Expanded version asterisk to give more context. I've been married to my husband for a few years now. When we first started dating, I was warned about his family. His parents, especially his mom, have a way of putting on this air of superiority. I get it. They grew up with a lot more privilege than I did. But the judgment is real. I've tried to be polite and cordial, but sometimes it feels like no matter how much I try, they just don't see me as good enough for their son. I've had to endure side comments about my upbringing, the way I dress, even my career. They just don't understand where I'm coming from, and honestly, it's not something I can explain to them. When I was younger, I had to fight for every opportunity, every break. I didn't have the luxury of a perfect family or an easy path. But when I married my husband, I knew that his family came with the territory. I've always tried to be the bigger person, keep the peace, and let him have his relationship with them without me stirring the pot. The week-long visit was supposed to be fun and relaxing, but I felt like I was walking on eggshells the entire time. It's always the same thing. His parents hosting extravagant dinners, making passive-aggressive comments about my upbringing, and just the constant pressure to be perfect. I know I shouldn't let it affect me, but it does. By the end of the week, I felt emotionally drained, like I was carrying around this heavy weight that I couldn't get rid of. When we finally got home, I just wanted a day to clear my head. A day where I didn't have to be on for anyone. A day where I didn't have to smile through things that were making me uncomfortable or pretend that everything was fine. Instead, I wanted to be alone in my own space, to process everything that had happened and just focus on myself. But my husband didn't see it that way. He just couldn't understand why I needed the time alone, especially with so much to do. I've been trying to balance everything, keeping up with work, helping around the house, and now preparing for the holiday season. But I feel like I'm about to break. It's not like I'm asking for a whole week off or anything crazy. Just one day to get myself back together. Is that too much to ask? I know the holidays are stressful for everyone, and maybe I should have just powered through, but I really feel like I need this time. My husband's reaction has left me feeling like I'm in the wrong, and I'm just not sure anymore. Should I have just sucked it up? Or is it okay for me to need this me day after everything I've been dealing with? Am I the asshole for considering telling my best friend's mom about her boyfriend putting her in serious debt? I, 19F, have been best friends with Emma, 19F, since we were kids. Over the last 9 months, Emma has been in a relationship with her boyfriend, Tom, 18M, and when they first started dating, I honestly thought he was a great guy. Emma was so happy, and everything seemed perfect. However, things quickly took a turn for the worse. Tom cheated on Emma multiple times. She found evidence of his infidelity, including Grindr on his phone and texts where he was degrading her to his male friends. Despite this, she decided to give him another chance after he apologized and promised to change. I didn't agree with her decision, but I respected it and continued to support her as her best friend. Unfortunately, Tom's behavior got worse over time. He became more manipulative, and I've seen Emma change into someone I hardly recognize. She's become isolated and has distanced herself from her family and friends, and I've been trying my best to stay close to her, even though she's now in university about 5 hours away from me. Recently, I found out some shocking information. Tom has put Emma in thousands of pounds of debt. He convinced her to pay for his insurance after a motorbike accident, and when he couldn't afford his university accommodation rent, she paid that too. All of this has drained her financially. Emma comes from a poor background like I do, and now she has no money left at all. She's even in an overdraft and can't pay it back. She wants to drop out of university because her mental health is seriously suffering, but the university won't let her leave until she pays off the debt. The most upsetting part is that Tom is refusing to pay her back, and Emma has told no one about the extent of the situation, not even her mom. I've been feeling sick with worry for her because it's obvious she's being both financially and emotionally abused. I've had my own experience with a similar situation in the past, and I know how damaging it can be when no one intervenes. I'm seriously considering telling Emma's mom about everything, but I'm not sure if I'm overstepping. When I confided in another friend about what was going on, they said that I shouldn't get involved and that it's not my place to tell Emma's mother. They said it would be a dick move to interfere, but I'm honestly terrified that if no one does anything, Emma will end up stuck in this toxic relationship forever. I want to help, but I'm worried I might lose Emma if she feels like I've betrayed her trust. At the same time, I can't stand seeing her go through this. I've already seen how manipulative and controlling Tom is, and I fear he's going to take everything from her if someone doesn't step in. So, am I the asshole for considering telling her mom about the situation, or should I stay out of it and let Emma figure things out on her own? I just want to help her before it's too late. Here's the situation. My sister, 26, invited me, 24, on a trip to the Philippines, Thailand, and Vietnam with her and 3 of her friends. All of her friends are nice, and I get along with them, though I don't see them often since we live in different cities. The trip would be about 3 weeks long, and I'm excited about the opportunity. I told my boyfriend, 26, about the trip as soon as I was invited, and he immediately got upset. He doesn't want me to go because he wants us to experience those places together for the first time. He claims that if I go without him, I'll enjoy it so much that I won't want to go back and see everything again with him. We've talked about going to places like Vietnam together, and he had plans for us to ride motorcycles there, but that's not what I'll be doing with my sister's group. Our trip will be much more laid back and not focused on the kind of adventures we talked about. He's also said that he waited for me to finish my university years and didn't go on any trips when he had the money and time. I told him that I would have been totally fine with him going on trips with his friends while I was in school. But here's the thing. During that time, he worked full-time and spent a lot of his money on things like a $15,000 truck instead of using it for travel. Now, he's doing university at his own pace, taking 1 year at a time and working in between. He could have completed it all at once, but chose not to. So, now he's asking me to wait for him to go on a trip together instead of going with my sister. But here's the thing. I've never been able to travel as much as my sister, mostly because I was broke or in school. She's always gone on these fun trips, and I've had to turn them down, so this opportunity feels like it's finally my turn. Plus, I've already been to places like Italy, which my boyfriend and I have talked about visiting together, but apparently it doesn't count. He says, it's not the same, or I don't really want to go there anyway, which feels dismissive of my past experiences. Also, my boyfriend and I have traveled together before and will continue to do so in the future. But he's insistent that I wait for him to go to these particular places, and honestly, I'm frustrated by it. The kicker? My boyfriend can't even come on the trip with me, even if I offered to pay for him, because he and my sister don't get along at all. They actually hate each other, which makes the whole dynamic even more complicated. So, to sum it up, my boyfriend wants me to wait and travel with him instead of going on this trip with my sister. He's upset and feels like I'm being unfair, but I feel like I deserve this trip. AITA for wanting to go on the trip with my sister and not wait for my boyfriend? Am I the asshole for going off on the bride and groom? Throwaway account. I, 31 male, have known my friend Drew for 10 years, ever since college. We've been close, and he recently got married to his longtime girlfriend, Amy. They've been together since high school, and they were each other's first and only partners. They got engaged a few years ago and planned a wedding abroad for Amy's family, as they're mostly from out of the country. However, this summer they decided to change their plans. Originally, Drew told me they were going to elope in the States, but then he called me to let me know they had changed their minds. They decided to have me as a groomsman instead of the original plan where they weren't going to have a best man or maid of honor. Then, they decided to make me the best man, even though they had originally talked about a camping trip as part of the wedding. Instead, they changed that to a group outing at a game night venue. They let everyone know that the wedding was in Washington, and the reception was in Wisconsin. They said that any attendee who came would be their wedding gift, meaning that showing up was the present. I didn't think much of it because, as the best man, I was expected to be there, so I went. We stayed at an Airbnb with the couple, their dog, and one of Amy's friends, Tara. We went to a vineyard together. I was wearing plaid, cargo shorts, and a basic t-shirt to help with the wedding. I hyped up Drew, helped with some wedding tasks, and even tried to help out with food when Tara offered to pay for groceries. I also did my part with the wedding stuff, including making sure the dog didn't run out of the house at one point, for which I apologized profusely to Drew. However, once I got home, Drew went off on me. He said I wasn't there for him enough during the wedding and that I was more interested in the traveling and fun than actually supporting him on his big day. He said I dressed inappropriately for the vineyard and never chipped in for expenses. I apologized again to both Drew and Amy, but then they dropped me as best man from their website, told me that I shouldn't have helped with any future weddings, since this was only the second wedding I'd ever been part of, and even asked Drew to review my best man speech before the wedding. I was the only person doing a speech for him, and it felt like they were second-guessing everything. Amy has made it clear that she completely hates me. We both agreed to not speak during the rest of the wedding, which was uncomfortable but fine. During the game night, they told me last minute that they were skipping dinner before the event. I had to drive to the city on my own and wait for hours before it started. I was also told not to stay at the hotel they had arranged since I was staying with family, which was odd, but I didn't push it. I didn't speak to Amy during this time as agreed, but I tried to get to know the other guests. When the event started, Amy started making passive-aggressive comments toward me, especially about my career. It was awkward, but I kept my distance and didn't react. At the reception, I gave my best man speech as planned. However, I got an incorrect meal from their menu, even though I had informed both of them multiple times about my dietary preferences. I tried to let it go, but the whole evening just felt off. After the reception, Drew and Amy called me and accused me of still not being there for them, not talking to Amy, and disrespected her by supposedly dragging her name, which I didn't do. When I asked what exactly I said or did wrong, they went silent and wouldn't clarify. At that point, I lost my temper and went off on them. I told them they had disrespected me, treated me like trash, and that I was done with how they were treating me. They called me an asshole and hung up on me. From a distance, FEI had followed Amina.
Am I the asshole if I change my wedding RSVP after having my +1 rescinded? I have a friend from college who is getting married in 2.5 weeks. I received the invitation just a week ago, and the invite included a QR code that directed me to their wedding website on the knot. The wedding is on a Friday, which is very last minute, and I'll need to take time off work to attend. I'm friends with the bride from college, and we have one mutual friend who is also invited. However, our mutual friend isn't able to attend, so I won't know anyone at the wedding except for the bride. When I went to RSVP on the knot, it gave me the option to add a +1. I've never seen this option before without specifically being offered a +1, so I assumed I was allowed to bring someone. I'm not in a long-term relationship, but since I won't know anyone else at the wedding, I asked my friend to attend with me and added her as my +1 in the RSVP. A few days later, I received a text from the bride telling me that I don't have a +1 and shouldn't have added my friend. She said I can't bring her and still wants me to come, encouraging me to make friends with other guests, even though I won't know anyone. I'm guessing the bride and groom may have mistakenly allowed me a +1 in the RSVP system, but she didn't apologize or clarify any misunderstanding. She just told me I shouldn't have added anyone. I have pretty significant social anxiety and now feel very nervous about attending the wedding alone. I get very uncomfortable in situations where I don't know anyone, and I'm now reconsidering using my paid time off to attend a last-minute wedding where I'll be completely on my own. Am I the asshole if I change my RSVP to no, since I won't know anyone at the event? I feel conflicted because I technically said I was available when I RSVP'd yes, but it was on the assumption that I'd be able to bring someone along to keep me company. Am I the asshole for losing my composure at a family gathering? At a recent family gathering, I ended up calling out my brother in front of everyone. I'm a 40-year-old man and I had a small bag, basically a fanny pack, sitting on a table near the entrance. The bag contained my keys, phone, my child's medication, and other essentials. I watched my brother, who's 30, pick up my bag and take it into another room. I followed him and asked him to hand it over, telling him that I'd seen him pick it up and walk away with it. With a grin, he taunted me, saying, "Go ahead, tattle on me, no one will believe you. I always win. Go on, see what happens." He claimed he didn't have the bag. I then went to his wife, explained what had happened, and asked if she could help. She spoke to him, then came back to tell me he didn't have it and that I should leave him alone. At that moment, he leaned around the corner, smirked, and mouthed, "Told you so." I gathered my partner and our child and said we needed to leave. Although I didn't swear or name call, I was visibly upset and definitely not calm. This isn't the first time I've been on the receiving end of his nonsense. Despite my reaction, several family members reprimanded me, saying my response was over the top and that my behavior was concerning. Eventually, my brother disclosed where he had hidden my bag and we left immediately. Normally, I'm easygoing, I have the disposition of a ska band. I don't understand why people blame the victim for reacting with strong emotions to something they shouldn't have had to endure in the first place. If my perspective here is off and there's a better way to approach situations like this, I'd like to know how I could handle things differently. Edit/update. Would I be the asshole if I sent this thread to my family? Am I the asshole for asking my boyfriend to quit his sport? Update. Are people not seeing where I asked him to stop playing? He can coach, mentor, watch, etc., and that's fine with me. It's the constant injuries, the financial drain, and then him yelling at me that I'm the reason he's broke that made me ask him to stop playing. I'm a 23-year-old woman and I've been with my boyfriend, who's 28, for about 2 years. He's been playing rugby throughout our relationship and started about a year before we met. Rugby feels like the third person in our relationship, so I finally asked him to stop playing. Was I wrong? Every Saturday is rugby day, which means he wakes up, watches a game, plays a game with his team, then watches another game afterward, usually finishing off with YouTube highlight reels until he goes to bed. He also has 2-hour practices every Tuesday and Thursday. Additionally, he coaches a high school team and assists in coaching a college team. After each game, practice, or scrimmage, he comes home with some sort of injury or is simply debilitated by pain. He's constantly covered in bruises and cuts. He's been to the hospital for a separated shoulder, a split eyebrow, a split lip that went all the way through the muscle and fat, and the most recent incident involved turf beads in his eye, which almost blinded him, not exaggerating. He'll take off work for games and practices, cancel dates, and miss important events for them. When my family home caught fire, we had a fundraiser. He tried to skip it for a game. He only attended because the game was canceled. During my birthday dinner, he asked if we could rush it so he could make it to practice. We can't go out or do anything on rugby days. We can't be intimate because he's too sore and he can't even function on those days. He always says, "It's tough on rugby days." But at this point, Saturday is rugby day has turned into every day is rugby day. He often gets stressed about money since we live in an expensive area, yet he always seems to have money for new cleats, new studs for his cleats, joint tape, and team memorabilia. Basically, he always has money for rugby like an addict always has money for a fix. To be clear, I'm genuinely glad he has something he enjoys. I'm happy he coaches, that his students look up to him, and that it boosts his self-esteem. We've both met some amazing people through the rugby community. But the 1 a.m. calls that he's in the hospital, getting yelled at because he's broke, catering to him after every game because he's sore, consoling him when he's devastated over losing a starting position, and having to live, breathe, and eat rugby because he does, it's just too much. When I finally asked him to stop playing, he freaked out. He told me I don't appreciate the things he cares about, and that I should be thankful he has rugby, or he would be dead. He said he has nothing else. Now I feel horrible. Am I the asshole? Am I the asshole for telling my best friend that I am pregnant? I'm a 33-year-old woman and I've been very close friends with N, 31, for about 8 years. We've gone through a lot together, and over the past year and a half, I've been by her side for her infertility journey. She has been through 2 inseminations and 2 rounds of IVF, all without success. She has PCOS and doesn't ovulate naturally. My partner and I started trying for a baby around the same time she did, and in the past I asked if she would want to know if I got pregnant. She told me I could tell her. A couple of months ago, her second round of IVF failed, and she was understandably devastated. She mentioned that she didn't want to talk about pregnancies when we met up, so we avoided the topic. At that time, I already knew I was pregnant, but I respected her wishes and didn't say anything. 2 weeks later, she called and told me her doctors had discovered a possible reason for why IVF wasn't working. She was undergoing treatment for an infection and was hopeful she could try again in a month. I was excited for her and supportive. Since she had brought up the topic of her treatment again, I decided that I would tell her I was pregnant when we met in person. I was already 10 weeks along and planned to announce it publicly soon, so I wanted her to hear it directly from me. When we met up, we chatted about her for a bit and then I shared my news. Her reaction was cold and she only said, "Oh, congratulations then," followed by, "That was fast, huh?" I was a bit taken aback but gave her grace given her situation. Although I had hoped she would be happy for me, I understood and decided to give her time and space, so we didn't talk again for a month. A month later, I reached out to ask about an exam she had at work. She replied with a 4-minute audio message, telling me she was offended that I had told her about my pregnancy when she had specifically asked not to talk about that topic. She said she didn't want to hear the news from me and didn't want to see me for a while. Was shocked and explained that she had reopened the topic by discussing her treatment and that I thought she would be optimistic about the new discoveries. I also felt hurt by her setting the terms for when and how we could be friends. It's been a month since then and we haven't spoken. I think about her and worry for her, but I also feel hurt that she doesn't want to be part of my life or my baby's life. I'm not sure if this friendship would be healthy if she does want to reconnect. So, am I the asshole? Am I the asshole for putting a lock on my bedroom door in the apartment I share with my husband and his family member? Sorry it's long. My husband and I live with his sibling, G, in an apartment that is paid for by his family. G frequently brings friends over and one of them, Al, is a regular guest who practically lives with us at this point. I tend to avoid the common areas because I get anxious and uncomfortable around so many people, but I don't mind keeping to myself. I have a vanity room where I keep my clothes and jewelry, and I installed a small camera there for peace of mind, as no one locks the apartment door, day or night, and I wanted to protect my valuables. Later, I decided to put a lock on the vanity room door as an additional security measure. Recently, while my husband and I weren't home, G allowed their friend L to enter our personal space without permission, supposedly to charge a device. This was especially unsettling because my husband and I have private, personal items in our bedroom, and it felt like a serious invasion of our privacy. I feel that G was also at fault for allowing a frequent guest to enter such a personal space, especially since it is our private room as a couple. After that incident, my husband and I decided to put a lock on our bedroom door for additional privacy. I even explained to Elle beforehand that it was for privacy and safety, given the constant traffic in our apartment. Everything seemed fine until G texted my husband, angrily accusing us of being paranoid, and saying locks and cameras aren't necessary because they were raised with trust as a family. Since then, G has been distant and I've been avoiding G and L as I feel like they're both upset with me. I tried to reconcile with G, but they were dismissive and rude, leaving me feeling like I was back in school dealing with bullies. It's especially hurtful because I had opened up to both G and L about some personal struggles, thinking they would understand why I would want some extra privacy. Now, I feel like I'm an outsider in my own home. So, Reddit, am I the asshole for putting a lock on my bedroom door and wanting more privacy? Am I the asshole for setting boundaries and not letting a homeless girl I just met a few weeks ago sleep at my house, even though I have been letting her shower, giving her clothes, money, and food? I met this 22-year-old girl about a month ago when she happened to pass by my house while I was sitting on my porch. She needed a change of pants because it was her time of the month, if you catch my drift. Over the past few weeks, I've let her shower, I've bought/made her dinner, given her $20 for food, provided her with clothes, a coat, a backpack, an iPhone charger, and a set of headphones. She's come over to my house sometimes unannounced to hang out, use my Wi-Fi and chat. Recently, she got kicked out of the shelter where she was staying after getting into a fight with another girl, so now she's homeless. She met a random guy, who sells drugs, on the street and has been staying with him for the past week, but she couldn't go to his place tonight. I didn't let her stay at my house because I don't know her very well. And I don't fully trust her, especially since no one else is willing to take her in, not even her friends or family. It's going to be cold tonight and she'll be spending it in an abandoned house. I feel like an asshole. Am I the asshole? Am I the asshole for telling my sister that I can't go to her wedding without my son? I, 24 female, have a 5-year-old son named Sam. I had Sam at a young age, as did his father John. We have a healthy co-parenting relationship to this day. John is American and I am not, so we got married when I got pregnant to ensure that we could all live together here in the US. My family wasn't happy about my pregnancy and pretty much shut me out. John's parents welcomed me with open arms, but they are elderly, so all the responsibility of caring for Sam falls on us. This means no nights off, no frequent dates, and nothing that doesn't include Sam. Most of the caregiving falls on me because I handle the household while John works long shifts. 6 months ago, my mother called to tell me that my sister was getting married. During a video call, my sister asked me to be her maid of honor, and I was thrilled to accept. But when I received the invitation, issues started to arise. The wedding is in my home country, and each guest is responsible for their own travel, lodging, and clothing costs. John offered to work overtime so Sam and I could go, and after months of extra work, I managed to buy a nice dress and book a simple hotel room. A month before the wedding, I called my sister to confirm our attendance, and that's when she told me children weren't allowed. I told her it wasn't specified on the invitation because it literally wasn't, and she said she thought it was something everyone would just assume. I explained that I have no one to leave Sam with, given our financial situation, and she suggested leaving him with John or hiring a nanny. John works long shifts and we don't have the budget for a nanny for several days just for a wedding. She brought up a time when I hired a nanny during my father's hospitalization, which felt unfair since that was a medical emergency, not a social event. After a back and forth, I told her I would have to decline my role as bridesmaid since I couldn't leave my son. I want to clarify that I never asked her to make an exception for Sam. I understand weddings aren't typically for children, but I just wanted her to understand my situation after I told her I couldn't attend. She called me selfish and said she had already paid for my spot in the wedding. I offered to reimburse her for the dress, but she just hung up. Now, with 2 weeks left until the wedding, I keep getting messages, calls insulting me, and emails saying that since I live in the US, I should have enough money for a babysitter, which in my opinion is totally unrealistic. I got a refund for the dress and the hotel and plan to give the money back to John unless my sister asks for it to cover her wedding expenses. If she doesn't ask, well, I'm not sure if I should offer it to her again. Would I be the asshole if I charge for a cover-up of a nasty tattoo I did? I've been tattooing for a year now, and this is the first cover-up I'm doing of a tattoo I did myself. A few weeks ago, I tattooed a saying in Arabic on a girl's back. We both thought it translated to appreciate life, because the translation was right under the words in Arabic in the photo she sent me. A few days ago, she messaged me saying she wanted me to delete the picture of her tattoo off my page because it actually translates to something awful. I was shocked, so I ran the photo through Translate Lens myself multiple times, and it turned out she was right. The translation was gross. Normally, I check the meaning of tattoos in foreign languages, but I didn't check this one because the translation came with the reference photo. I quickly deleted the post and offered to work on a cover-up together if she was open to it. She agreed and I finished the design. She likes it and we're planning to do it soon. Here's the issue. I feel guilty about this whole situation because it's never happened to me before. I feel bad that I put something that awful on someone's body, and while I'm happy to cover it, I feel really ashamed of charging her for the cover-up. It's my fault I didn't check the translation, and I'm afraid she might think the cover-up is free as a form of apology. I don't want to make her feel like I'm just trying to charge her for something that I messed up. She may also think that because we have a mutual friend, I'm offering this as an apology, but honestly, I don't even know if I did anything wrong. Maybe I'm overthinking it. I'm conflicted because on one hand, I want to help her and I feel bad, but on the other hand, this is a complex cover-up, and I don't really have the financial means to give it away for free. If she were a close friend, I would totally do it for free, but she's a friend of a friend's girlfriend, and I'm unsure where we stand. So, would I be the asshole if I charge her for this cover-up? If I do, I'll definitely cut the price down a lot. Am I the asshole for missing another big moment for my half-siblings? My dad has been inconsistent about being in my life. He and my mom divorced when I was 1 and he bailed right after I was born. He came back when I was 8 months old, but my mom let him stay only for a month before realizing he wasn't serious about being a family with us. He just used her for a place to stay. When she refused to let him stay longer, he bailed again. He was briefly in my life from ages 3 to 4, then disappeared again. When I was 8, he came back for a few months, but that ended too. He showed up twice when I was 10 but wasn't involved after that. I also found out this summer that he didn't really pay child support. There was some money given for me, but it was probably less than $400 over the last 16 years. At 13 he moved here for good, or so he says. He was married again and had kids with his wife. He started visiting me again, and eventually I was required to spend every other weekend at his house, though I didn't want to. I even spoke to a judge about my wishes, but the judge said it was in my best interest to have a relationship with my family. I don't like being at his house. I only sleep in the bed assigned to me, and I don't take anything I care about or personalize the room in any way. Here's the thing. My dad and his wife encourage their kids to spend time with me and engage with me. They like having me there, and they've told me they wish I'd spend more time with them. The kids did nothing wrong, but I don't want to focus on building a relationship with them. I don't feel any connection to them, but I'm expected to be there for the big moments in their lives. This expectation comes not only from my dad and his wife, but also from my dad's parents, who I don't really know outside of the time I spent with my dad. They all expect me to take my role as a brother seriously, which I think is crazy since I don't have much of a relationship with them. If it's not one of my dad's weekends with me, I tend to miss the big events in their lives, and I don't make an effort to attend. Recently, I was invited to go trick-or-treating with them on Halloween. I said no, and they really pushed for me to come. I didn't, and after that, I received so many texts from my dad's phone and numbers I assumed belonged to his wife and his parents, telling me I was shitty for missing another big moment for my half-siblings. I ended up blocking the other numbers, but my dad's still texting me about it. Am I the asshole for not participating in these events and missing important moments in my half-siblings' lives? Am I the asshole for telling my house guests they need to leave over mental health issues? I, 31F, had a friend, 32F, from university reach out to me, asking if she and her sister, 25F, could stay at my place during their trip to the country where I now live, before they headed to other cities. I didn't have any issues with this arrangement, so I agreed. They flew over and were expected to stay at my place for a week. I live in the heart of a major tourist city. What I didn't know beforehand was that her sister has serious anxiety issues related to dogs. Neither my friend nor her sister seemed aware of the different regulations around dogs in this country. Here, malls, restaurants, bakeries, bars, and pubs are almost always dog-friendly, welcoming pets everywhere except for grocery stores. On their first day here, I took them out for a walk, and her sister became visibly upset when she saw dogs walking freely around the city with their owners, off and off leash. She started getting really hysterical when we went inside a Starbucks, and she saw dogs inside, sitting by their owners' feet. We immediately returned home, and I explained that it's impossible to avoid dogs in this city since they're commonly out and about. Her sister then told me she didn't want to leave my place at all because of these unpredictable dogs and preferred to stay indoors for the entire trip. I suggested that the places they're planning to visit next would likely have similar regulations and dog-friendly environments. At this point, her sister announced that they'd just stay at my place for a few more weeks before flying home, as she didn't feel comfortable going out. I told them I wasn't okay with this and that if her anxiety around dogs was truly that severe, they'd need to make other arrangements. Am I the asshole for asking them to leave after this unexpected change in circumstances? Am I the asshole for making a woman lose a costume contest? I'm the events chair of my fraternity this semester, and I organized our Halloween party, which took place yesterday. Every year we host a big costume contest. It costs $5 to enter, and the winner takes the pot. With around 30 to 50 entries each year, the prize is pretty significant. This year we had 40 people enter with about 160 people attending. In the past, there's been one girl who always wins. A lot of my fraternity brothers have a thing for her. Her costumes are usually the typical sorority girl style: a short skirt, boots, fishnet leggings, a bra or corset, and some animal ears with light face paint. Now, I'll admit my costume wasn't that creative either, just angel wings, white shorts, and a halo. So I get that people dress to look good more than for originality. But I figured that even though she looked great, the contest should be about creativity, not just who looks hottest. For the contest, she dressed as a bee, similar to her usual, with a short skirt and a revealing top. When the votes came in, she won by one vote, but I hadn't voted yet. I cast my vote, and my vice chairman agreed with me and voted too, which put her in second place. When I announced the results, she was visibly upset. She's won the last 4 years, so this was a shock for her. Later, one of my fraternity brothers who was upset about it, told her I intentionally voted against her because I didn't like her, which isn't true. I'm honestly neutral about her. She confronted me, accused me of having a problem with her, and we argued. I told her it wasn't a contest for the sluttiest costume, but for the best costume, and she should be glad we created a runner-up prize of $50 for her. We ended up getting separated after the argument. Now, several of my fraternity brothers are mad at me for upsetting her. Am I the asshole for asking my landlady to pay for the ice cream her grandchildren ate and the notebook they tore? For some context, I'm a student in my final year and living off my savings, so I don't have much money. I rent a room near my university from a lady who also rents out rooms to 2 other university students, so it's typically just adults in the house. Recently, my landlady's grandchildren have been visiting. There are 3 kids between the ages of 2 and 7. Normally, we leave our doors open around the house because it's just us adults and we all trust each other. But with the kids running around, I started keeping my door closed, though not locked. One afternoon, I came back to my room feeling that something was off, as though someone had been there and tried to put things back as they were. I was a bit nervous, so I asked my best friend, who rents another room, if he'd come in, but he said no. Then I noticed a bookmark on the floor. When I went to check in the kitchen, I found my special notebook, a birthday gift from my best friend a few years ago with a cute cat design, under a table. It was dirty, torn, and unusable. The landlady saw me almost crying. Stationery and gifts are special to me, and she offered to pay for a new one, but unfortunately that one is discontinued. Later, I decided to relax with some ice cream, which was a treat since my mom had sent me some extra money. But when I opened the freezer, I saw that the kids had eaten all of it, about a liter. The landlady doesn't know about the ice cream yet, but today I want to ask her to cover the cost of both the notebook and the ice cream. I feel conflicted because I don't want to seem rude, but I don't have a lot of extra money, and having my things eaten and broken has left me feeling very frustrated. I've now started locking my door. Update: it went well. I talked to her and she was understanding. She even asked if I'd found a replacement for the notebook. She also gave me a plate of homemade food, which is honestly a lifesaver as a student. I appreciate everyone's advice. I felt hesitant about asking, because I have a soft spot for kids. Regarding privacy, we've discussed it, and she assured me the kids were scolded and warned not to enter other rooms. Luckily, I didn't have anything dangerous at their reach. Am I the asshole for asking my roommate to close the door when she's having sex? My roommate, 28-year-old female, and I, 21-year-old female, have been living together for about 8 months now, and we generally get along really well. We've had some issues, mainly because I'm a bit messier than she is, but I've always thought we had good communication and usually managed to talk things out to reach a solution. Over these 8 months, my boyfriend, 23-year-old male, has come over many times, and whenever he spends the night, I always check in with my roommate the next day to make sure we weren't being too loud. So far, there have been no complaints about him being over. Today, my roommate brought over the guy she's currently seeing. He's been over a few times before and I don't usually mind. However, today they came home while I was sleeping. I've been going to bed around 8:30 p.m. due to seasonal depression, and I woke up to the sound of them having sex. This hadn't happened before, and I decided to go outside to give them more privacy. On my way out, I noticed that her bedroom door was wide open. Once I was outside, I texted her saying, "Hey, sorry to say this, but can you please close your door? I can hear everything. I came outside now, but if you can please?" Her response was simply, "Sorry, I never told you when you were too noisy with your visits." I immediately felt bad, apologized, and said that she could have mentioned it to me before if it was an issue. She replied with, "Okay." I try to be more understanding. I didn't mean to embarrass her. I just thought maybe she could close the door as she has done in the past. Now she says she can't close it because of her cat, who needs access to roam and use the litter box. I wonder if I should have just put on some music and not said anything, but I assumed she would have mentioned it if I made her uncomfortable. My boyfriend thinks I'm not in the wrong, but maybe I shouldn't have texted her while they were still having sex. Am I the asshole? Edit: I've noticed a lot of people are surprised about leaving the door open during sex, and I agree it's unusual. But to be fair, she explained that she keeps it open because of her cat. If she closes it, the cat can't walk around freely or access the litter box, which is why she left it open. Am I the asshole for refusing to feed my sister's kids for free every day? My older sister, who is 37 years old, has 3 kids under the age of 10. I am 25 years old, don't have kids yet, but I'm a junior sous chef and cook a lot in my spare time. During some recent time off from work, my sister asked if I could babysit her kids after school for 3 days. I said yes, took care of the kids, and she paid me for it. I thought that would be the end of it. After the week was over, she asked me what I had fed the kids and wanted to know how I managed to get them to eat a full meal. Her kids are picky eaters. Typically, they'll eat what they like off a plate, such as meat, potatoes, rice, or noodles, and leave the rest, especially the vegetables and sauces. According to my sister and brother-in-law, even if you give them extra vegetables instead of other items, they won't eat them. They'll wait until their next meal, and if you insist they eat the vegetables first, they'll simply skip the meal. I knew about their picky habits before babysitting, so I tried a few techniques to encourage them to eat more balanced meals. On the first day, I blended vegetables and other nutritious ingredients into their dinner without them noticing. On the second day, I served the vegetables in plain sight but prepared them in a way that disguised their appearance. By the last day, I presented the vegetables differently